Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Saved the World with the Quirk of Love? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Prologue 1. It all begins in spring. Spring was in the air, and the wind carried the scent of cherry blossoms. The day was appealing, sunlight bathed them in a wonderful warmth, the birds sang in the air. And behind the school building, a young boy with energy thrumming in his body and a heart bursting with uncertainty and faux courage met the eyes of the girl standing before him, whose hands were clasped in front of her bosom as she stared at him, a patient gaze belying anticipation, frazzled nerves and undying hope. This was Ellis. A fairly average boy and particularly non-important in the grand scheme of the universe. But each person had a tale of their own to experience, and to live to tell, of course. But putting that aside, every person was destined for a story's unfold, where every action brought forth a consequence, and shapes the experience into either something meaningless or memorable. And in this very moment, Ellis would be facing one of his greatest turning points yet. The boy took a deep, long breath. Air filled his lungs, and with it, all the nerves were hitting him all over again. Despite that, he steeled himself, knowing that there was no turning back. He had to be a man and face the inevitability of the moment, no matter what. Thoughts made up, he snapped into a perfect bow before the girl in front of him, who in turn gasped slightly in surprise. Shutting his lips tight, he mentally recited his confession while locking his gaze on his polished black shoes. The spring air drifted softly, warm and comforting, just the right push of encouragement he needed. Tomi, ever since we've known each other as kids, I've always liked you. His right arm shot up diagonally from his position, holding out a single flower for her. Would you please be my girlfriend? Immediately after asking, his breath hitched and he held it, unwilling to break formation. What would she say? What would she do? Did his breath sound bad? Did his clothes look terrible? He'd checked himself out in the mirror to make sure everything wasn't out of place, but there was always the chance that something was off. Did Tomi know? What if she hated him for that? It felt so out of character for Tomi. Logically, he knew this. She was a fantastic girl who, while not popular by any means, was gentle and kind to all around her. Not a single person despised her, and throughout their years of being together, he could testify that she was indeed a noble soul. But the brain and the heart loved to do that. In terrifying moments such as these, they loved to catastrophize, inventing surreal circumstances and ideas solely to intimidate him. And he dreaded to see them come true. So many erratic thoughts swirling around in his brain like alcohol in fancy glass, making him second-guess himself over and over again as the silence dragged on. His heart thundered in his chest, almost making him feel nauseous, but he held on to that thin line of power called hope, and willing himself not to throw up over his shoes. That would have just been an instant mood killer. Seconds turned to minutes. Could have turned to hours. Could have been days, for all he knew. Such was how long he felt that time had gone before, eventually, he heard her breathe deeply. You know, I was afraid that you'd just keep silent all this time. We've known each other for 5 years after all, and we'd been so close as friends. Ellis gulped. That's right. We've been friends for a long time now. But that isn't what I want. Her sudden outburst caught him off guard, though none of that could compare to the words that followed. I want to be something more than just friends. Eyes widening, Ellis's head snapped upwards to take in the visage of the girl he'd loved for so long, her teary eyes and rosy blush making her look more appealing underneath the sun's veil. It was a sight that would be burnt into his very retinas for years to come, especially the words that came forth a moment later. Yes, Ellis. She shouted from the bottom of her heart, her smile so wide. I'd love to go out with you. Tomi. If anyone had ever asked what happened afterwards, he couldn't answer them. It had almost felt like a blur. All that he could faintly recall was the immeasurable euphoria that blasted through his very brain, followed shortly by him running at his new girlfriend, catching her in his arms and spinning the both of them. Her giggles were the most appealing music to his ears, and lost in their own world, The two consummated their newfound relationship with a soft, emotional kiss, electric in the air. They'd found their happy ever after. To Katsumi, though, the PD just made her eyes roll. Sappy BSDRDS. Couldn't they have just found a room or something? K. Kaken. Don't be too loud, they'll notice us. Like they could. Not when they're too busy making out like it's the end of the world. Seriously. Even though they were behind a school building, didn't they know better than to do these sorts of idiotic things out in the open for all to see? Sure, the spot they'd opted to settle on was fairly secluded, but that didn't mean jack shit if someone was going to coincidentally walk there as well. Shaking her head, the blonde walked off, her green-haired friend trailing behind her and leaving the two lovebirds to their own devices. To think that taking out the trash would somehow end up with witnessing a bunch of idiots' love scene was not what she had been hoping for. What she'd give for mind bleach. It was indeed a day in spring, and the air was nice and chilly, though it lacked the cold bites of winter. That meant the wind felt nice on her skin, and even she could appreciate the scent of the blossoms that were carried by the wind. Unfortunately, all of that was absolute bull when they were out here taking out the trash. And then they had to come upon two horny teens skiing one another's faces out. Really a good way to make them fully appreciate the good weather, huh? Naturally, where her thoughts on the matter were more pessimistic, her friend seemed happier by the outcome, the smile on his face telling enough. I dunno. I think it's cute. Ellis and Tomi have been dancing around their feelings for a long time now, so it's a good thing that they finally took that step forwards rather than let it fester forever. Yeah. And by tomorrow, I've got a feeling both of them will be insufferable. They'll be singing about it for days. You're not wrong there. Of course she wasn't. When was she ever wrong? In fact, the last time some nobody in their class scored a date with another no-name from some other school, he'd been so over the moon and kept yelling about his relationship to the rest of the class over and over. Wouldn't shut up about it even after a week. But he shut up afterwards, though. She made sure of it. And sure, some, Izuku mostly, would argue that violence was never the answer. But if a person refused to listen, then chances are, violence is the answer. And what do you know? When she threatened to beat him up senseless the next time he opened up his mouth about his stupid girlfriend, he never brought it up again. The two of them reached their classroom once more. With classes having ended, most of their dumb classmates had already left to go home, so it was pretty empty. Standard desks, standard blackboard, standard windows. There wasn't much to comment about the room. This was the kind of room one would see even in dramas where high school was the primary setting. There was a group of 3 girls still chatting away at the front, probably gossiping about some lame celebrity or something. The moment they entered the class, however, the girls were quick to glance their way, their eyes in particular shooting a dirty look towards Izuku. He didn't notice, though, too enamored in talking her ear off about some mission that All Might had just finished up a few days ago. Katsumi noticed, however, and promptly growled their way. That scared them, their eyes going wide, and they hastily fled the scene with their bags. Kaken, sighed Izuku, putting away the remainder of his stuff into his bag. That was unnecessary. They were giving you shit again. Like hell I was gonna let them get away with that. It's fine. It doesn't mean anything to me. Even if he said that, she doubted she could completely get over it. But, for his sake, she kept any comments to herself, left to only grumble profanity towards them, and maybe a hope that they might just trip down the stairs while they were running. That'd be a good piece of karmic retribution. Shaking her head, she looked back to him as she tugged her bag onto her shoulder. Well, you'd better hope that none of them try to bully you outright, then. Otherwise, I might throw them out the window. Kaken! He cried out, nervous. We're on the 3rd floor. Better. Might finally teach them to adopt a landing strategy. What? Landing strategy. That actually does sound plausible. But no throwing people out of windows. The exasperation in her tone broke through her anger, making her snort in amusement as she ruffled his hair. Fine. But just so you know, I only got that from an anime. Pretty insane stuff. Kids training to be heroes or whatever were practically flung into a forest to fight against demonic beasts. I bet if we do that here, everyone, except the 2 of us, would probably be mauled first. Kaken, I have no quirk to protect myself with. I'd be mauled all the same. Yeah, right. There's no arguing that. That is literally the most logical outcome. Hey, you're smart. You'll figure something out. Now come on, she said, cutting off any further remarks. Since we're done here, let's go check out the ramen place. I heard they've added some new dishes. We hadn't gone there in a while, so I wanna see what the buzz is all about. Oh right. I completely forgot that. I also heard that they might add more options for spiciness levels too. Due to popular demand, if I'm not mistaken. Wait, seriously? Her surprise earned her a nod from the boy. A grin came to her right after. That's what I've been wanting for forever. Come on then. I wanna see how hot those biestas could make their ramen. Kaken, the store doesn't close until 7. And I'm not risking it closing up early. Hurry up. Jogging out of school grounds, Aldra Junior High was quickly left behind as they headed into town proper. Muzutafu always did get busy right around this time, when plenty of people would already be getting off of work, the streets bustling as people walked here and there. The afternoon air was not hot, however, which made their journey a pleasant one, though that would certainly change with time when the heat kicked in. Not that any of that registered in her mind, however. All that she could focus on was the route that they were taking to reach the ramen store, Izuka being the only one making sure to greet the locals while she homed in on what truly mattered. Situated between a DVD rental and a florist, the ramen store was red. And by red, she really did mean red store label, red banners, red lanterns. Thankfully, it was just the exterior that was mostly red, while the inside was more bamboo-colored. She didn't pay it too much mind before stepping inside. The sliding doors pushed open as she made her entrance known. Seats for 2. The man behind the counter was large, almost like a bear, with a thick beard and dense hair sitting underneath his cap. He shot her a sharp look, and she fought back with an equal glare. Sparks would have flown if either of them had laser eye quirks, but thankfully, hers made explosions while his was just making lame graffiti on walls. She had the better quirk, that was for sure. A hand on her shoulder gently pushed her to the side, Izuku's nervous chuckle diffusing whatever tension there had been. Hi, Mr. Yamoto. We'd like seats for 2 and your menu please. Izuku, whatever deadly look he had on his face evaporated the moment he met Izuku's gaze, going from absolute zero to fatherly warmth in a matter of seconds. Welcome. Just got finished with school, I take it? Yeah. It was our turn for cleanup duties this week, so we had to stay back a little longer. I see. Well, go ahead and make yourselves comfortable. I'll have your menu in a jiffy. Thanks, Mr. Yamoto. While the man made sure to smile at him, Katsumi jutted out her tongue at him, making him glare back at her. They went to the back seats, where she promptly deposited herself on a cushion with all the grace of a cat, and by grace, she meant the ferocity of a tiger. She was no domestic cat, that was for sure. Izuku, on the other hand, sidled carefully into the chair opposite of her, smiling timidly. You know, it wouldn't kill you to admit that Mr. Yamoto's ramen tastes good. That's all he wants to hear from you. He'd wish. I only come here because the prices are cheap. If he wants me to admit his food is good, then he'd better work for it. 2 menus were set down on the table, the massive man scoffing. And though I recognize how petty I am, I'll make sure to draw those words out of your mouth someday, brat. But who you calling a brat? We heard that there are new dishes. The greenette quickly interjected. Can you tell us about them? 20 minutes later, with 2 steaming bowls of ramen placed right in front of them, Izuka's a fairly simple concoction while hers was boiling, lava red and hot, they dug in without fanfare, enjoying their after-school meal. Her eyes shot wide open at the first taste. Hey, I'm digging this. Not a bad new dish. Right? I'm surprised that both of these are just the same dishes. But just a difference in the spice used has completely changed their flavor profiles. It's incredible. Well, incredible wasn't the word she'd be using, but she allowed him to say it, if only so that it pleased that dumb shop owner. They sat there in silence, her hair tied back as she slurped up her noodles while her childhood friend ate at a more sedated pace. Shoulder to shoulder, Most people would have almost thought that the two of them were on a date, though it would have been odd to some that they'd take their date to a ramen place rather than some fancy restaurant. And honestly, screw them. So what if they'd chosen to go for some plain old street food rather than the posh stuff? Two best friends should be allowed to enjoy whatever the hell they want, and no one was going to stop them. Heck, she was happy that he'd invited her out like this. This meant way more than any fancy stuff in the world. After a while, Izuku spoke once more, dabbing at his lips with some tissue. So, Kaken, I forgot to tell you, but I don't think I'll be available for our after-schools training this Friday. His words gave her pause, and she furrowed her brows at him. What? Just Friday? He said quickly. Which is why it'd be nice if we could move it to another day. Maybe Saturday? I'm free at that time. I mean, I am too, but what's up? Oh, I'm doing community service after our classes. Not sure how long it'll take for me to be done, so I'm just telling you ahead of time, just in case. Community service? Again? Haven't you been doing that for a while now? Yeah. Sakasuke-san called out to me and said that it's just a small place. A lot of his volunteers wouldn't be available, and he himself would be heading to a different place, so he asked me if I would be free. So I told him that I was down for it. Dude, you can just tell him that you're busy training for UA's entrance exams. He'll get it. In any situation, just saying that one was making preparations for entrance exams to some high school or university would be more than enough reason to give one a free pass from any events, just because a sane person would understand just how important education would be to the growing young man or woman. But UA High wasn't any regular high school. It was the ultimate high school in Japan for those looking to make it to the pro hero scene, and the very dream school she had her sights set on. After all, its alma maters were some of the best in the scene, with All Might, the #1 hero and their own idol, having graduated from that place as well. And if she wanted to reach that same height, then she would be targeting for that same school. Obviously, the requirements to get in were going to be high. Countless people from all over the country would be applying for it. And the more applicants there are, the stricter the guidelines and the higher the bar to separate the losers and the average from the cream of the CRP. And Katsumi was determined to prove herself part of the upper echelons, hence her endless endeavor to improve herself for that exact opportunity. She'd stayed in the top of her class rankings since forever, be it academics and physical sports, meaning that she was a shoo-in for UA. She just knew it. And if there was anyone else from their class that could make it, well, who else would it be if not Izuku? Guy's already got the brains for the stuff. He just needed to build some muscle and they'll have to take him in too. Hey now, it's just this one time. Usually I do them on the weekends, but this time, it was just bad timing. I'll work hard on Saturday, I promise. The blonde pouted back. I know you will, but you're too nice for your own good. It's okay. Really. I don't mind doing it, he chuckled. It just feels nice to help out with work like that. Heck, isn't that the whole job of a hero? To help others out. The blonde wanted to argue with him on that, but she understood just how genuine he was on that remark. And he wasn't wrong. Heroes helped people. That was just the basis of a hero, who pushed themselves so that they were well equipped to both protect people and carry out jobs that were too tough for the average civvy. And, truthfully, she did admire that part about him. It simply served to strengthen the notion that he, of all people, deserved to become a hero. Quirk or no, he'd make a fantastic one, and that meant the both of them would be getting into UA High together. Fine. Then I guess we'll put Friday on hold. Thanks, Kaken, a small pause. Do you want to join me? It'd be nice to have you around. You know that kind of sheet isn't up my alley. I'll think about it, she quickly added when she noticed him drooping a little, almost like a kicked puppy, only to perk up again. The girl had to hold in her wince at how cute he looked. Wait, no. That wasn't what she was thinking. Then, if I'm free, I'll tell you, I guess? Sure thing. Why, now eat up, or your noodles will get soggy. Realistically, a hero was going to be involved in all sorts of situations. Rescue missions, reconnaissance, beating up bad guys. And one can be sure as hell that it was going to take a lot of smarts and strength to be capable of all those things. And where she had those in spades, Being the top student in their class, whether it was in the books or on the running field, the same couldn't be said for her childhood friend. Yeah, he was a genius in his own right. No person could write such meticulous notebooks about the pro-heroes like he does without having such a sharp mind, but with his quirklessness, he had a physicality that was just about as normal as the average civilian. Maybe even less so, since they'd still have the advantage of a quirk over them. That wasn't good enough in the line of heroes, though. Sure, there were some who got around by having powers that didn't need them to be the most physically fit person in the world, but if there were situations where they needed to run from danger or hold out against an enemy attack to buy time for their allies, then they'd still need to be strong enough to last out in the first place. No point having sheet stamina if they're out of the game so early. As such, she began her training from a young age, throwing herself into the ringer over and over again. And Izuku, while he may not have done the same at the start, eventually joined her with enough prompting and promises that they'd make it into UA High together. That was a promise they'd made as kids. And she was going to see it through, no matter what. Come on, Izuku. Get those legs moving. No stopping for even a second. Trying here, Kaken. Trying wouldn't be good enough to get him even through the entrance exams, but he was more of a doer than a talker. And he was definitely walking the walk. Well, running the run, in this situation, as he kept his treadmill's speed similar to hers, which was around 7.0. A real running speed to put the fire in the calves and chest, but a good way to really build up that stamina. And it wasn't like they'd immediately jumped into such a high setting, obviously. They'd taken it slow by walking, then jogging, before turning it into an almost run for almost 20 minutes. Once that was over, she cued for the both of them to lower the speed back to a walk, 2 minutes, before finally stepping off. The girl hissed a little at the pins in her feet, but for the burning in her body, she felt great. Nothing like a good sweat out to really feel healthy, even if Izuku looked close to tipping over and fall on his face. If he did, he was likely going to pass out for good, and they couldn't have that. Get some water in you. Then we'll work on our sets. Feeling up for it? Her question was met with heavier breathing and a thumbs up. Good enough. Let's take 5. There was a plenty of sets they had to get through. A lot of them. Hell, even skimming through them on her phone had her wincing, but she pushed on with the grit of a soldier, determined to never lose to whatever bullshit was thrown her way. And yes, this was bullshit she willingly heaped onto herself, but it was all for a good cause. Today was leg day, meaning it was all about the lower limbs. Her least favorite, if she had to admit. If the arms were dead tired, the most she wouldn't be able to do was pick things up. Losing her legs to exhaustion, on the other hand, made walking such a painful hassle, but such was the reality of the situation that she just had to accept. When they were both ready to get started again, they began a fresh new set of workouts to target as many parts of their bodies as possible: squats, deadlifts, lunges, presses, and curls. That came down to around 6 exercises with 10 reps each, and it was a fair amount for the both of them to throw themselves into, even if it was pretty exhausting. And look, one might argue that the regime they were putting themselves through was downright insane. But it had been Izuku who had been the one to look through her suggestions, polish the timeline, and adjust the rest PRDS and the durations, all after reading up on various articles, guides, and word of mouth. If there was anyone she trusted more than anyone else, it was him. Grunting as she finished her last rep of curl, she cracked her back and let the relief flood in her system, sighing before she moved away to take a sip of her drink. 2 hours in the gym was pretty good, and there was a nagging feeling in the back of her mind that that number might just grow once they actually get into UA. Well, par for the course, if that happened. Something hit the floor. She turned her gaze backwards, and it was to the sight of her childhood friend lying on the gym floor, his chest heaving up and down as he took large gasps of air. With how much sweat he was producing, she wouldn't be surprised if he'd succeed in leaving an outline on the floor underneath him. She would have scoffed if she wasn't feeling particularly exhausted herself, breathing heavily as she wiped away the sweat from her face with a towel. Yo! She less called out and more breathed out. I tell you, not to lie, but we're done. Finally. Today was pretty rough, huh? You got that right. Despite himself, he was wheezily laughing out loud, a wide smile stretching onto his face. We were just so, in the flow of things, weren't we? Just hearing him say that brought a grin on her own face. Yeah, she said, pleased to know that even he had enjoyed himself, despite his body likely to feel like sheet for the rest of the day, and for who knows how long. It was great. But exhausting. Exhausting is an understatement. Yeah. Now get up. Walk it off and then get changed. It took a while, but he eventually did push himself up into a sitting position, his breathing a little more steady now that he had the chance to just lie down for a bit. He grabbed his drink and downed it one flow, a loud gasp of relief expelled as he set the bottle down. All right then. Guess it's time to get going. I'll be cooking with Mom later too. Yeah? Let me guess. Katsudon. The chuckle came accompanied with a flush on his face, though that might have been the result of his exercise to begin with. And oh no, we're trying to SW things up. We'll probably be making gyudon. Don't pass out in the kitchen while you're busy frying the beef, then. I'll be fine. His laughter made her unconsciously smile wider. I'm not so clumsy that something as ridiculous as that might happen. Says you. I still remember that time in art class when you had the supposed greatest idea to splash paint onto the canvas and expect it to come out great. What happened instead was you coming out to be a rainbow. His flush deepened a little. Hey now. You can't blame me for trying. All those artists make it look cool. Whatever you say, Izuku. It is true though. Sure. It was dismissive as it could have been, but really, it was just her teasing him for the fun of it. Izuku probably recognized it too, which was why, even though he was pouting up a storm at her, there was no missing the little quivers in the corners of his lips, trying desperately not to break character and fall into a giggling fit. Having that knowledge made it hard for her to stay serious as well. Her teeth clenched hard as she tried not to laugh either. If she'd ever been in a bad mood before, it had all but evaporated now. Both the workout and the banter between them had effectively left her in a state of bliss, relishing in both the soothing afterburns and the comfort of good company. And it was enough for her to even walk over to his side and just lean against his side, earning muffled complaints but no resistance whatsoever, as he resorted to resting his weight against her in turn, shoulder to shoulder and head to head. This had been their dynamic as childhood friends for so long ago, and her mind couldn't help but dredge up the earliest memories of their time together. Had they met in the nursery? Or kindergarten? She couldn't perfectly recall things, but she knew that they'd struck it off almost perfectly, and they'd been together since then. Even when all the other kids picked on him for being so soft and quirkless, calling him names, she hadn't let any of that get in between her own friendship with him. Not when he understood her in a way not even her parents did, and when he'd been one of the few who truly saw her for who she was. Not some kid prodigy that their peers and even teachers would continuously fawn over. Not some brutish girl that could probably scare off other kids. Not some hero wannabe with ambitions way over her head. She was just Katsumi Bakugo, who had genuine intentions of becoming a hero like her idol, All Might. And Izuku respected her, supported her dreams, and that meant she would help him realize his of taking that same road as the man they equally admired had taken. A little poke on her shoulder had her humming back. You lost in thoughts or something? Something like that, she said, a little happy that he knew her too well. What? Can't have time to think for a little? No, nothing like that. Just wanted to know if you're ready to go back now or not. Sure. Might as well. We both stink. Don't say that. Geez. Now I'm becoming self-conscious. His words made her roll her eyes. PSSH. We both stink from a hard day of exercising. How could that possibly be terrible? You know, it's hard to make a solid argument against you sometimes, Kakin. You know that. Yeah, I'm a genius. Thanks for noticing. She snickered when he poked her again in the shoulder numerous times. Let's get going then. She pulled herself to her feet. A good shower sounds nice. And great as working out is, all this sweat isn't. I hate the feeling of my tank top sticking to my body. Yes, same here. Let's go. If there was one thing Katsumi was pretty bothered by, it was the fact that both she and Izuku lived relatively far away from one another, making it hard to just walk to one another's places to hang out in their home or whatever. Not like she'd been thinking about that. Seriously. It would just be really convenient for study sessions and stuff. Nothing else to it. Today, though, was the usual occasion of one's parents inviting the other family over to hang out. And since they'd finished classes earlier today, her old hag had thought it nice to invite the Midoriyas over for dinner, of which Auntie Inko had all but happily agreed to. And that meant one thing. Izuku would be coming to her house soon. Yo Brett. Just wanted to ask if you wanted carbonara or… Not the time, hag. I'm cleaning. Ignoring the old woman's shout about calling her a hag, Katsumi worked as if she was possessed, cleaning up every edge and corner of her room, making sure to leave no spots untouched. It wasn't like it was bad to begin with, but the mere idea of Izuku stumbling into her room only to find it a mess, even though it wasn't 99% of the times, was enough to leave her sweating buckets. So that was what she got to doing, making the bed, folding her clothes and putting them away, spraying some air freshener, cleaning her bathroom, all done in a matter of minutes, despite her intellectually knowing that Izuku and her mom would take an hour to get here. The door rattled as someone slammed their fist on it. But I'm talking to you over here. And I told you I'm cleaning in here. Look, just make whatever. I'm not picky. Fine. Unlock the door when you're done, and I'll leave some clothes for you on your bed. Yeah, sure. She called back out, taking a step back to quickly scan her room for anything out of place. Okay, everything looks good. I mean, nothing about it was wrong to begin with, but you can never be too careful. She supposed the only things that would count as odd would be the few All Might memorabilia scattered around her room, figurines, posters, and merch. Still, none of this would hold a candle to Izuku's room, and if there was one word to describe him based on just that, fanatic seemed just about right. Not like she was going to mock him for it. He had good tastes in heroes, and they'd both idolized All Might, the #1 hero of Japan, since they were kids, so there was nothing there to be embarrassed about, though one could also argue that maybe Izuku went a little too far in the idolizing department. Nevertheless, now that her work was done, she began unclothing and throwing it all in a basket, hopping into her bathroom and slipping under the showers. Hot water was always the way to go, and soon enough, she was already lathering her body with soap and working the shampoo in her hair, which was always the most frustrating part of all this since it was a little too long for her liking. Still, just for this occasion, she'd be doing her dmed best to make herself as presentable as possible. By the time she was done with her shower, toweling at her body and hair, she got back into her room and assessed the pile her hag had left for her. No sooner had she done so did she stomp her way to the door, swinging it open and yell loud enough for the whole house to hear her voice. Beg, what the hell are you making me wear? Shut up. That was the only thing that we had washed. Everything else was either dirted up from your exercises or had some food stains in 'em. And you didn't wash those? Shut it. I always told you to wash your own med clothes if you plan to wear them again later, but you never do. Don't drop the blame on you, brat. Katsumi winced. Okay, so maybe she'd always forgotten to put her clothes in the washing machine because she had her mind on plenty of other things, but this was just… Ugh, but it's not like there was any time to get anything ready now. They'd be here anytime soon, and she wouldn't want to keep Izuku or Auntie Inko waiting. That'd just be poor manners. Growling up a storm and making sure that the hag would be paying dearly for this, she shut the door and marched back to her bed, whereupon she had to wonder if this was some kind of divine punishment from above as she locked eyes on the accursed piece of garment. Goddamn it! It wasn't so weird to have the Midoriyas come over to visit, being as close as they were since the two of them were born. Heck, it went even further back, as the hag and Auntie Inko had apparently been classmates back in the day, and had stayed connected throughout the years even when they'd settled down with their own families. As such, was it any surprise that both she and Izuku would end up becoming acquainted with one another as well? That was probably the best thing in her life to have ever happened, not like she'd ever admit to that in any way, shape or form, giving her a best friend who shared her dreams and gave her the motivation to see it through. So of course, when it came to that level of closeness, it would stand to reason that there was nothing to be ashamed about between the both of them. She knew he was a total all-might geek, and he knew that she was almost tunnel-visioned in becoming a hero. That was all there was to it. Well, barring one secret, but nothing could have ever prepared her for this moment, When she was the one to pull the door open and meet his gaze, the smile on his face and the words on his lips dying swiftly as he laid eyes on her, and then proceeded to gawk in disbelief. "K. Kaken? Don't say a word," she growled, opening the door a little wider and wishing that a hole could open up beneath her feet. Tried as she might, her face felt hot, and she would sooner punch the wall than hear anyone comment about it. "Come in, Izuku, Auntie." The hag and Auntie Inko were delighted at seeing one another, as expected, and her dad welcomed the Midoriyas with friendly cheer. Izuku had used that opportunity to get over his previous surprise, though he seemed like he wanted to say something at her, but looked too embarrassed to say it. And that made her feel embarrassed, and god dang it. Stop looking at her. By the time they were already at the table, a heaping bowl of bolognese spaghetti blasted its delicious scent into the air, whetting her appetite. The urge to fill her plate first was tempered by the expectation that, were she to do so, the hag would just nag at her. Plus, seeing that their guests were here, they should be going first. And yet, it was Izuku who took her plate first, filling it with a healthy portion and a good number of meatballs, before handing it back to her. "What? Izuku? You didn't need to, you prick." It's fine. It's no trouble," he waved her away with a smile, making whatever retort she had get swallowed up. He then looked towards the hag. "Thanks for making dinner, Auntie Mitsuki. This looks delicious." If there's one thing a mother is most proud of, it's her cooking. True. Nothing's more satisfying than making food for the whole family, tittered Auntie Inko, pushing back some stray strands of hair. "Up. Now come on, you're the guests here. Fill your plates. And take more when it's empty. We've got plenty." Even when he was the guest here, Izuku had made it his duty to go put the food on everyone else's plates, despite the hag's protests. He just cited the reason being that he was much closer to the bowl of food, making it easier for him to reach it, so he decided to make it his duty to fill everyone's plates. That was how he was in a nutshell. Nice to others without ever asking anything in return. And funnily enough, that sort of personality shone in the most mundane parts of life, especially here at the table, from the way he helped serve everyone their food, to making sure everyone had all their utensils, to then waiting until everyone had started eating before he dug into his own food. Even when he was done, he'd be the first in the kitchen washing the dishes, just because he wanted to. Katsumi hummed as she chewed down on her meatball. Hasn't changed in all these years. So, Izuku found a girlfriend yet? Red eyes shot wide as she suddenly lurched in her seat, smacking her chest with one closed fist. Izuku panicked, first by the question, Auntie? Then by her suddenly choking on her food, Kaken, which forced him to grab her glass of water and offer it to her. She used that opportunity to chug down, all while the hag continued with her earlier question. "Yeah, your junior high is ending soon. I was just wondering if there's anyone that caught your fancy yet." While Katsumi did her best to recollect herself, Izuku took a moment to ponder over her question, answering with a timid smile afterwards. "No. I hadn't even considered the idea of it, let alone been approached by anyone else." "Seriously? But you're such a cute kid. Any girl would be lucky to have you." "See cute?" If he'd looked red earlier, he was now an absolute strawberry, the freckles helping to add to the imagery. She could almost hear the steaming kettle from his ears. "That's, Mitsuki, dear, maybe ease up on the kid." "You kidding?" I've always wanted to break the question to him, but there'd never been the perfect time for it. Now's obviously the time. When she was finally under control of herself, Katsumi leveled a glare at the hag. What the hell was she doing? And what kind of question was that even? The most common questions one would level at their own child's friend was how they were doing in school. Not if they were already a couple with someone. And just the idea of that filled a hole in her gut. Izuku, her best friend, smiling at another girl, holding her hand. They'd be doing all the couple things like sitting underneath a tree, feeding food to one another, gifting each other on Valentine's Day. It just sounded so gross. It was just gross. That was it really. The image of Izuku being mushy at all was just really gross. And that wasn't her just being upset that the girl in that vision wasn't her, not like she wanted to be his girlfriend. That wasn't it at all. She tried hard to wipe away the urge to growl, yet she could already feel her teeth clenching tightly, boring a hole into the hag's forehead. That is, if she had laser vision. As things stood, all she could do was just glare silently, and that only made her grin smugly back. No. I mean, I'm not even close with anyone in our class, let alone outside of it. Honestly, Kaken's like my only friend in school. Wait, seriously? Any thought of teasing him wavered, genuine concern rising to the fore. Not even her dad was unaffected, and Auntie Inko smiled sadly his way. Yeah, but it's okay. It just is. I'm plenty used to it already. There was no anger there. No bitter sadness or denial. Just plain acceptance of the entire situation. If anything, he didn't sound ashamed of the fact itself, but more so that he had to admit to it at all. Partly because he never did anything to stand out, and partly because of his quirkless inheritance, which seemed to deter so many girls from entertaining the idea of even being his friend. It made her feel upset, and she despised the part of her that was actually happy for it, if only because it meant she had him all to herself. Plus, it's not like I've anything to complain about. His smile that came next was the genuine article, more so when it shifted towards her. Because I've got Kaken. And that's enough for me. The words must have frozen her brain, because it took too long for her to actually comprehend what he'd said before she finally reacted. Why you? Huh? And it seemed like the words had only dawned on him after a moment spent in considering her reaction, his happiness morphing into abject shock a few seconds later, horror intertwined with shame as his cheeks burnt anew. Wait. Meant to say, wait, Auntie, it's not what you think it is. Oh. Looks like my hooks caught onto something. That line was just the opener she needed, the grin coming back easy as she pushed through the earlier awkwardness. This brat caught your attention, then? Well. Looks like my dreams of having you call me mother-in-law might just come true someday. Mother-in-law? Hell yeah. I've always wanted a sweet little child like you. Instead, I had to have Miss Bad Temper over here. Her hands smacked the surface of the table, her face heating up. And who did I get that from? Shut it, brat. And don't be rude to our guests. I wasn't being rude to them. You see this kid? But you, Izuki, you're such a gentleman. If you married little Katsumi here, I'm sure she'd actually mellow out into such a lovely lady. Mom. And never was there a time in her life when she would willingly call the hag her mother. But desperate times called for desperate measures. And this was frankly one of them. Shut up. Look at you two, blushing up a storm. You two are so adorable. Oh, I need to take a photo of you too. Wait, don't turn away. Dinner quickly escalated from there, and there was no peace that lasted long until the evening turned to night. Somehow, no explosions were had. Good sleep was important for good growth. And if there was one thing peculiar about her, it was the fact that she always slept early. 10:32 was definitely way too early, but she'd gotten used to that. Hell, she might have even found enjoyment in catching early sleep, knowing that she wouldn't have to deal with that early morning drowsiness other losers would have to deal with. Stepping out of the shower, the blonde let out a sigh of relief as she toweled her hair, feeling the cold air blow in through her window. She appreciated spring for being the nicest season, not too hot in the morning like summer, and not too cold at night like winter. It was just nice, though tonight definitely felt a little more chilly than usual. If it rained, then her sleep tonight was going to be even more cozy. And quite frankly, she needed to sleep on today's memories. Especially after the hag had utterly shamed her in front of Izuku and her mom. Seriously, what was with that? A ping from her phone on her study made her jump. She looked over to it, and when its screen lit up, she walked over to pluck it from the table. No matter how hard she told herself not to smile, she just did, grinning at the wallpaper, the sight of her and Izuku, sitting side by side on a train as they looked into the phone for a selfie with grins on their faces, courtesy of her friend, before looking at the messages. Aizu, can't sleep yet. Had some thoughts. Aizu, call? Not the first time, and definitely not the last. The girl snorted, though she couldn't miss the slight joy she felt at the words he typed out, knowing he wanted to talk to her rather than sleep on it. It was close to her bedtime too, but she found herself not minding whatsoever, more excited than she'd ever dare to admit to chat with her friend. And so, after quickly calming herself, she dialed his number and rested her phone against her ear. It took a single ring before she could hear his voice on the other side. "Hey, Kaken. Hey, you in your room now?" "Yeah. Mom's already asleep. Had to tell her to go, or else she'd be asleep in front of the TV, he chuckled briefly, to which she snorted in turn. Also, thanks again for dinner. It was really great. It's cool. You can come on over anytime. The same for you too. You're free to visit us whenever you're free. Just the thought of coming over to his house had her feeling giddy, and she waved her free hand about before smacking it against her bed. Alright, right? Cool. Sure, we'll take you up on that offer. She paused to clear her throat and recollect herself. So, what's bothering ya? Nothing serious. I was just thinking about UA, and got a little scatterbrained just thinking about it. Oh yeah. She moved over to sit on her bed. Like what? Mostly hero-related stuff. Our hero names, for one. His answer had her snickering. I've been thinking up one for myself for years, and I haven't the slightest clue. You know what my answer is. The Great Explosion Murder Goddess, Dynamite. Okay, I like Dynamite. That play on All Might is actually clever, and he has good tastes as always. But I think the rest of that is concerning. Concerning? You mean kick-ass and awe-inspiring. Kaken, your name would terrify both villains and civilians. Murder doesn't really scream hero, if you think about it. Plus, imagine having to write all that out on paper when you're making a report. I can imagine that would get tiring at some point. The image of such had her almost laughing aloud, stuck behind a desk and signing papers in her name. Yeah, that whole name was long, but it was cool. Shish. Fine, I'll rework it. Dynamite works, though. You should keep that. Yeah, I will. And how about you? When do you think you'll find a name for yourself? I don't know. Been experimenting, and none of them has resonated with me just yet. You could always go for Green Might or something. What? No. His laughter on the other side made her smile easily. That sounds so weird. It would be so obvious that I'm copying All Might. At least yours works. I would be caught dead using that name. Then just keep thinking about it. We still have time before we get into UA anyways. I guess so. A small pause before his voice spoke up again, though softer this time. Hey Kaken, another pause. Actually, never mind. Sorry, ignore that. Now hold up, you can't just backtrack like that. Come on, spit it out. I'm sorry. I was just having those kinds of moments. Thinking if I have what it takes to make it into you. What? This again? The blonde furrowed her brows, shifting on the bed. Dude, what are you saying? We've been working hard for this. Don't tell me you're getting cold feet now. I'm not. Kaken, I want this. I want it so badly. It's been my whole dream. Our dream, she corrected. And it's turning into reality, you know. Just be patient. Yeah, but, well, I guess I was just suddenly worrying for nothing. Can't help but fret over what ifs and the like. Sounds about right. If there was one thing that differentiated her and Izuku, it was the fact that he was a great worrywart in just about everything. There was always hesitation, a little reluctance in dedicating himself to things that often seemed so out of reach. Some called him a coward for it, but Katsumi respected her for that caution. It meant that whatever decision he did eventually take was done with the utmost consideration for all factors, unlike some others who would have committed to things and regretted them later on because they didn't think things through. Still, they'd been at this for years, so even if Izuku didn't think he could do it, she knew he could, and she made sure to tell him that, no beating around the bush whatsoever. Izuku, as she expected, seemed hesitant to believe in her completely, chuckling weakly. It'll just be really difficult then. And you'll overcome it. Nothing ever stopped you from getting this far. Now you just need to continue working hard, and continue believing in your own potential. Okay? There was no immediate answer, and she knew it was just Izuku taking the time to really consider her words carefully. Katsumi was glad he wasn't here to see her, lest he would have seen the genuine worry on her expression. Eventually, however, he did speak up once more. Yeah. Nothing else to it, is there? I just have to go for it like I have been all this time. The relief was palpable. That's it. Stop worrying so much and just focus on doing what you can, okay? Your hero material, Izuku. You need to believe in that. You're right about that. Obviously. When have I ever been wrong? Her words elicited a short laugh from her friend, and her own spirits calmed after knowing she'd gotten through to him. Seriously, Izuku. You can do this. We'll both get into our dream school together. Right, of course. Someday. His voice became muffled as he tried to hide his yawn. Well, guess it's time for me to go. Sorry to keep you up, Kaken. I really appreciate this. Nah, it's fine. I don't mind staying up for you. It took her a little less than 10 seconds before her brain finally caught up with what she said, eyes going wide as she sat up straight. I mean to chat. To chat and help out, Izuku. Nothing else. Don't get the wrong idea. Yeah, I know. You've always been a big help. The honest response cut through her frazzled nerves all at once. Good night, Kaken. See you tomorrow in school. See you tomorrow. When the call ended, Katsumi stared at her phone, wondering if a new message might just pop up. 5 minutes later, and she eventually put it aside, dropping her head on the pillow and sighing out loud. When her phone buzzed once, she couldn't have snatched it faster, eyes shooting to the screen. It was from Izuku, just as she expected, but she couldn't have been mentally prepared for it. It was a picture of her while she was talking to Auntie Inko in the living room. It was a pretty good picture in its entirety. From the angle to the light coverage and the colors, Izuku's photography skills were showing here. As expected, considering he had a knack for drawing, though how that somehow translated to photography skills just as good as his drawing was beyond her. But beyond the finer details, it was the girl in the picture that really stood out. Because, unlike her typical home outfits, she'd been forced to instead wear something so uncharacteristic of her. The turtleneck sweater and the long flower-printed skirt did not scream Katsumi Bakugu in the slightest, especially when she was still flushed from the hag's teasing and was smiling shyly at Auntie Inko. It was, like, the antithesis of what she stood for, that being awesome and badass. She looked too soft, too girly. And yet, whatever pleas she could have written to him about getting rid of the image died when the next message popped up below the picture. Aizu, you were really pretty today. Like really? Aizu, that's all I wanted to say, okay, bye. Katsumi stared wordlessly at the messages for minutes on end. She wasn't sure when she'd put it down, let alone turn the lights off and gotten into bed. She lied on her back, kicking away the blankets, and stared up at the ceiling. And she stared, and stared, and stared, and stared. Far too awake and absolutely distraught, the girl forced herself to do a quick breathing exercise. And then she took in a deep breath, Kaya-ia, and let out a high-pitched scream that woke up the entire house, and forced the hag to yell at her to shut up. Prologue 2, Spring is the start of stories. Spring was in the air, the early morning breeze scented by dew. The day was appealing, the sun was rising in the distance, the birds were beginning their song. And a young boy with green hair was moving through the streets in a stiff walk, his face slightly flushed and sweating in anxious anticipation. All around him, other students bickered and joked about one thing or another, while he was walking alone, not prepared for the day whatsoever. Oh, school was no trouble to Izuku Midoriya. By all accounts, he was fairly capable in both his academics and athletics, the former because he was a nerd, hence making studying and revision a fairly simple task when he knew how to make notes, courtesy of his experience with his hero observation journals, and the latter because of his regular routines with his childhood friend in preparation for their UA enrollment. Thinking that last bit put a slight damper on his emotions. The single best hero school in the entirety of Japan, where great heroes like All Might had come from. Could he even make it there? He didn't even have a quirk. There was no way he would be able to get in. No. He shook his head, unwilling to let himself be daunted. Thoughts like those weren't what he needed right now. Katsumi had believed in him from the very start, and his parents and hers had fully supported him through and through. He needed to see their trust in him fulfilled, no matter what. Arriving outside of his classroom door, he took a moment to steel himself, both to face his classmates and to face her. If, by all accounts, nothing come out of this, then that would be for the best. He just needs this to be a calm, typical school day. Once he was fully psyched, he put on a smile and grabbed the door handle, sliding it open. "Good morning." A chalk was rapidly flying towards him, its trajectory decidedly on his forehead. Izuku, wide-eyed as he was, quickly tilted his head to the side in a fast jolt, allowing the offending thing to smack against the wall behind him, a puff of white on the gray paint. Inside, a couple of groans sounded, coming from almost everyone there. "He dodged again?" someone remarked, sounding almost annoyed and impressed. "Those are quite the reflexes, Midoriya. What's up with that?" It's nothing. If you'll excuse me." Whatever confidence he had earlier faded away as he shuffled over to his place, not wanting to meet the eyes of anyone staring at him. The whispers were still there, some about how unlucky they were, while a couple few were probably planning some other prank to pull on him. Welp, that was just how it was whenever Katsumi wasn't around. Because she was the top student with an amazing quirk, she was practically worshipped around these parts, both by the teachers and students. So no one dared to go against her, and since he was her friend, that meant they couldn't mess with him. Though, that didn't stop them from trying a few times whenever she wasn't around. She always did act as a ward, and even when she threatened them should they ever try anything against him, that wasn't enough of a deterrent. It's not her job to enforce the rules, though. That should be the teacher. A shame that even the teachers don't like him. Or, well, they just didn't really care about him all that much. Nothing to be done about that. On the bright side, they'd be leaving this place behind in a couple more weeks as everyone headed off for their respective places. He already knew people would be lauding Katsumi for wanting to go to UA High, but laugh in his face once his name would be mentioned alongside her. Not like it would matter. He just needed to prove his worth and get in, and that would be enough for him. He didn't need to rub it in their faces like Katsumi told him. Just taking that first step of getting into his dream school would be more satisfying. Before he could fall deeper into thought, the door opened. He looked up, and promptly froze alongside the rest of his classmates as their eyes fell upon her. Long blonde hair fell down to her shoulders, her ruby eyes sharp and powerful. The black of her girl's uniform contrasted so well against her creamy skin, bringing to mind her strong hands that packed an explosive punch, literally. Complete with a slim figure and modest disposition, he dared not think further on that other part, and she was practically one of the most appealing girls in their year, despite how rough she may come off to some. He could imagine the light dancing around her. And then she opened her mouth. "What are you FS looking at? Got some problem?" And the magic fell apart. Everyone either muttered greetings or stuttered denials to her statement. The girl huffed, perhaps disappointed by their cowardice, and made her way over to her table, whereupon she sat just one table in front of him. Quickly, Izuku forced himself to pretend as if he was jotting down some notes in his book, counting in his head while he listened to her footsteps get closer to his position. It was only when she was looming over him did he finally look up, smiling wobbly. Morning, Kaken." Yeah." Without much else said, the girl dragged her seat back and plopped herself down on it, already kicking her feet up on her desk. Inwardly, he sighed in relief. From the looks of things, she wasn't bothered by whatever he wrote to her last night, which had taken so much courage from him to write, followed by a lot of screaming as he questioned why he even sent it to her at all. It was embarrassing, all right? He genuinely meant to say something about it back then during dinner, but with the grilling Auntie Mitsuki had put him through, the chance just wasn't there. Plus, if he was to say something, then everyone would hear him. That would be too much. So, he thought to let her know by text, just because he did think she was pretty in that dress. Not like she wasn't pretty otherwise, though. She is pretty. Peeling even. But that was the first time she'd ever worn something much more girlish than usual, and that clash between elegance and tomboyishness was... crud, he could feel himself smiling just thinking about it. He wrested control over his lips and buried his face into his arms, sighing lightly to do away with the thoughts. He couldn't be weird. Otherwise, Katsumi would feel weird, and then it'd be awkward. But if she's this calm about it, maybe everything is fine. Well, that's the story he was going for, but if he had ventured to look at her properly, he would have seen just how flustered the girl was that morning, unwilling to say anything to anyone as her heart did somersaults in her chest. Such was their dilemma, one could say. When physical fitness tests come to mind, most people go back to their school days, usually dreading the exhaustion of the exhausting class. It was always a chance for the jocks to show off and for the girls to moon over them or whine about the tiring portions. You know, the typical song and dance. Izuku kind of liked it, though, providing an incentive to perform better and better so that his consecutive reports would come out even neater than the last. Plus, he could always use it as reference on where he needed to put more focus into during his next gym outings with Katsumi, so that was a nice benefit. Stepping onto the field in his gym clothes, he came over to Katsumi, who stood some ways away from the rest of the group. "Yo," she greeted. "Hey, Kaken," he said in turn, looking around. "I think this'll make it our second last evaluation before we graduate, doesn't it?" "Yeah," she hummed. "Well, school was a bore and all, but these aren't so bad," and then she grinned. "Plus, we get to compete with one another, and that's pretty fun." "Kaken, you're way better." "I don't see what you mean by compete." "You kidding? Your run time's been getting better. Heck, I think it's close to mine, barring a single millisecond." "I suppose." And yeah, the two of them were the best in their class when it came to sports, though that was expected at this point. Since they'd started going to gym together since, what? A year ago? They'd just been constantly pushing themselves to the point where school had become a simple endeavor. Nothing unlike what they put themselves through on a weekly basis. Though, that also made him wonder just how much more draining the real thing in UA would be. He'd heard stories from graduates of how they had the best equipment readily available in their gyms, and that they even had landscapes capable of being manipulated by a teacher to fit their students' needs. That was incredibly interesting, and he wanted to see for himself how that worked. All right then. Today are your physical fitness tests. A collective groan broke out amongst the students. Their teachers steadfastly ignored them. "We'll start with a 50 meters run. You'll run in pairs, and I'll be timing you. Who'll be going first?" Looking at one another, the two shrugged before raising their hands. So started the mutters amongst their classmates on who amongst them was faster, with everyone hedging their bets on Katsumi, which even he had to admit was the right bet. They took their positions behind the chalked line, Izuku pressing the tip of his shoe against the ground a few times to orient himself. He rolled his shoulders, then positioned himself for a straight dash, Katsumi silently doing the same as they stared ahead. Just a straight run. No turns, no tag teaming, no other nonsense. With a breath taken, he lowered his position, waiting quietly. Ready, set. Fuiti. It was akin to a wound spring snapping into position, his legs and arms already moving as his body bound forwards in a dash for the finish line. The air whipped at his face, the jolt of adrenaline surging him onwards as the girl beside him ran just as fast, their shoes dragging on sand and gravel and his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Their classmates' roars sounded all around them, turning into a point of nothingness. And just as quickly as it came, so too did the moment end, his right foot breaking through the finish point and reaching the other side. Midoriya makes 5.7 seconds. Bakugo makes 5.9 seconds. The words were followed by a loud what, courtesy of both his classmates and Katsumi, whose head snapped towards the teacher. Her mouth and eyes were wide open, staring at him in stupor alongside the rest of the class. And then she turned towards him, grinning widely. "Yo, you actually beat my record." "Shiraizu. Nice one." Yeah. He breathed out shocked. And happy as he quickly realized, laughing breathily. "That's insane." "All right, that's 1 point to you. I'd better not fall behind here." Unfortunately, that was the extent of his capabilities, Katsumi deftly beating him and everyone else in every other category. Some complained of her great athleticism, though he knew it was simply a result of her hard work. She took her training far more seriously than anyone he'd ever met, her dedication on par with a hero's diligence in his job. Between the two of them, it wasn't a clean sweep as he expected, however. Their points were relatively close, and he'd managed to claim one more win in the form of standing long jump. That was more than he'd expected, last year's results having been squarely in her favor. The knowledge of that made it very clear that his efforts had definitely bore fruit, and though he was somewhat tired by the end of it, he couldn't help the wide smile on his face as he clapped his hand against Katsumi's. This is nothing bad. We've done way worse. Ah, yeah, we have. Alright then, everyone. We're done with the fitness tests. Weak, exhausted cheers were his response. He snorted. Now head back inside so you can get changed. And I mean it. Even if this is the second last class of the day, you're not allowed to stay in your PE clothes. Now get a move on. Every time after PE, the chance to just sit down was always nice. It sounded weird to think about, but because the body was always going to end up exhausted by the end of it, just sitting down back in the classroom felt great, although the alternative of going home and lying in bed was certainly more desirable. Sure, he wasn't that tired, but it was the thought that counts. And even his body appreciated the moment when he found himself back on his stiff, wooden chair, sighing in relief. So, what's happening next? Probably the teacher coming to talk to us about our future plans. Katsumi snorted at that. Sure. Like there's anything else for the two of us. We're a shoo-in for UA High. We aced the mock exams. What else is there to worry about? The entrance exams, whatever those would be. He'd gone on the net to see what graduates had to say about UA, and it seemed like the exams were changed every once in a while to spice things up. And it seemed like this year was going to be different, so that was that. Nevertheless, there was no time to further ponder on that because the teacher had already entered the classroom. He looked serious and sounded serious, and when he began rambling about the importance of finding the careers that suited them and their quirks, Izuku had to wonder if there were any jobs out there that would even take a quirkless like him. And there were plenty enough, thankfully. The arts and music industry came down to creative talent, cooking would be doable, and some other things like journalism and the like. Other specialized jobs like doctors and policemen would do just as well, but he understood that physical work like laborers and construction workers might be tougher since those with strength-enhancing quirks, or anything that offered longer resilience, would be invaluable in those fields. Now that he thought about it, any job that wasn't superhero work was possible for a quirkless like him. Sure, it'd be difficult, but who's to say that it was impossible, right? The world didn't used to have quirks, after all, long ago. And humans had made do, working as per normal and living their lives with nary a concern. The only difference now was that a vast majority of the population had superpowers, but outside of that, probably nothing much. But let's get real. All of you will just be going into the hero course, right? The teacher's shout was accompanied by everyone's cheer, quirks coming to life and making him smile appreciatively at the diversity. And he was curious in how their quirks could be geared towards hero work, be it rescue operations or unavoidable combat. Those thoughts promptly died when someone's foot slammed the table, his eyes darting to the girl in front of him who was now standing with one leg propped on the table, the other on her chair, and throwing her fist in the air with the confidence of a champion. All you losers think you have what it takes to become heroes? Then don't expect anything easy if you face off against us. She poked a thumb against her chest, grinning savagely. Me and Izuku aced the mock exams and gunning for UA. If you think you're ready to face off against us, then do your worst. Murmurs broke out amongst the group, reverie in equal measure alongside envy. UA High was no joke, and when someone like Katsumi said she was going to get in there, most people had to believe her. The same couldn't be said for him, which was reasonably fair. Getting into a hero school without a quirk, that superpower that almost 99% of the population has, was akin to throwing a baby into the ocean and expecting it to be as good as a professional swimmer. It was just unrealistic, and it begged the question of whether or not he'd make it in. But hey, he'd gotten this far already. No point in doubting himself when he still had the firm belief of his family and his friend. 2 hours later and the bell had rung, signaling the end of the day. Izuku promptly put away all his stuff into his bag and met Katsumi's grin with his own. Hey! So, you busy or what? Nah, not really. Though I was thinking about messaging my mom and asking her if there's any groceries she needs picked up. Right, the words had her hunching her shoulders, grimacing. Pretty sure the hag asked me to do that today too? I wanted to check out that Korean place that recently opened downtown. Let me guess. It had some spicy food and you were interested in giving it a try. Yeah. Plus, I've never tried Korean food, so I was looking forward to it. Hag. Another time then. It's not going anywhere, he chuckled weakly as she grumbled profanities underneath her breath. And then, after a while, he asked her, do you want to go together, then? Grocery shopping, I mean. Oh, she blinked, then shrugged. Sure, I guess. All right, then let's text our families. Wouldn't want to worry them. The hag can drop off a cliff for all I care. Weakly, she added, but the old man would worry too much. Fine. I'll do it. Texts sent and their plans made, the two childhood friends made their way to the local shopping mall, the air conditioning quite appreciated. People were buzzing about as they looked at stores and chattered with one another with food or drinks in hand. And there were a couple of students hanging out with their own friend groups, laughing energetically over one joke or another. Izuku smiled fondly at the sight. It brought back memories of a time long past when he and Katsumi used to play with all the other kids in the playgrounds, overall just having fun as they explored and ran and did dumb stuff together. Simpler times. Purer times. And then the doctor gave him what was essentially a death sentence, and it was unavoidable. The other kids had seen him as something different, and ostracization became inevitable. No one would invite him to play or hang out since then, and he'd always been on his own. Well, not on his own, per se. His eyes moved to Katsumi, who was checking her phone for the list of groceries her mom just sent her, her annoyance visible. He smiled softly, telling her that he was going to get the grocery cart. She waved him off in the meantime, and he went on over to grab one. He'd been so confused why Katsumi, someone who was so fervent in quirks and power and openly berated others for being weaker than her, had stuck to him so closely since then. Maybe it had been pity at first, not wanting to leave the poor cry-baby all on his own lonesome. A reasonable explanation, but it didn't explain all the other parts. Like them always having birthday parties, or the nights they would stay up playing games together, or talking about their future careers as heroes, or training together. It wasn't pity he would come to know, but the fact that she appreciated him for who he was. Plus, the fact that they shared so many ideals made it all that easier for the two of them to bond with one another. A part of him had to wonder if Katsumi would have ventured out to find friends of her own had he never existed. She was so incredible, and a lot of people admired her, even if a couple of them envied her somewhat. It would be easy for her to find her clique. She was popular in school, and she'd be popular anywhere else too. She didn't need quirkless Izuku. And that scared him. But there was nothing to gain from entertaining that thought. She had made it clear that he was her only friend, and it was evident, to this day, that she wasn't going back on her word anytime soon. And he couldn't lie to himself when he felt elated by her words. He returned with a cart. All right, got your list? Yeah. It's a little long. Couldn't she just do this herself? Izuku chuckled. It's fine. We're here now, so we might as well get to it. Plus, seems like there's a bargain going on today. Best we make good use of this slide of luck. While he pushed the cart, Katsumi did the work of inspecting each item and choosing which to put in. Sure, she was a self-proclaimed bad girl who would never be caught dead in the kitchen, and any attempt to have her make something edible often did end up with the kitchen getting burnt, but she could get just as picky as his mom does when it came to choosing their ingredients. Vegetables, done. Fish and meat, done. His mom wants some rock salt, whereas Auntie Mitsuki wants some skis and coffee beans, the latter of which he could only imagine was a request put in by Uncle Masaru, who had a weird love-hate relationship with coffee. The less he knew, the better. Humming to himself as he put in a jar of pickles into the cart, he checked his phone when he got a notification. Sakasuke-san was the name that popped up, and he had to wonder what the chief of the community service department had needed of him. Without wasting a moment, he dialed the man, bringing his phone to his ear. Sakasuke-san, good afternoon. Is something the matter? Izuku. Hey, sorry for calling. Are you busy? Nothing much. Just out buying groceries. Well, I don't want to bother you, so I'll make it short. I tried calling in some help to accompany you later this Friday, but it seems like everyone's either got their work in different places, or they're too busy with stuff. Sorry, but you're the only one I can rely on. That's so? Well, it's fine. I've done plenty of these kinds of jobs on my own, so it's no trouble. His response was met with a sigh of relief. Good to hear. Sorry again that I can't help you out beyond that. All I can do is send you the navigation to the place later on, and I'll have some supplies sent there so that you won't need to carry anything with you there and get started right away. Say, is the place dangerous? I heard it's pretty secluded, so... Oh, it's fine. If you're lucky, maybe you'll spot a deer or two, but no bears or the like. Maybe bring some bug spray if you want. Anything else? Just the usual. Bring some clothes that you don't mind dirtying. You're also free to bring your own food and water, but make sure you bring them back with you to throw away. There aren't any bins there. And don't go too far. There's only so much coverage you can get out there that it'd be a little difficult to reach out to one another. Gotcha. Standard fare. Yeah. Thanks for this, Izuku. It means a lot that you're willing to help me on this one. If anything, the place you're heading to meant a lot to my ma, long when she was a kid. Oh? Sakasuke had never spoken much about his family before, having stated how they hadn't been on good terms before he left the house. But from the fondness he spoke of her, it seemed like his love for his family still lingered through the years. Told me that she met my pops there when they were young. One thing led to another, and he decided to ask her out during their high school dance. The rest is history. Ah. That's such a sweet story. Hey, personally, I was never much for romance, but it always so fun to listen to them talk about their love life. A shame that those days are long behind us. It's never too late though. Maybe you should try and talk to them again. I'm sure they'd be happy to hear from you. Despite himself, he couldn't help but felt like he'd overstepped his bounds, quickly backtracking. Only if you want to. I'm not telling you to force yourself to do something. But family will always stick with you, no matter what. His did, after all. Quirkless as he had been, neither of his parents had ever given up on him. Never had called him a waste of space. Never seen him as anything but their son. Their family. In every sense of the word, they had saved him with their love, just as Katsumi had saved him through their friendship. You might be onto something. Maybe it's time I actually bury the hatchet. No point holding on to some petty feelings forever, am I right? Sakasuke chuckled, sounding a little lighter. On the other side. Thanks, kid. You're a godsend, I'll tell you that. When I meet my parents, I'll tell them all about you. Really? He flushed a little at that, but the smile on his face couldn't be mistaken for anything else. That would be an honor. And I hope things go well for you. Thanks, kid. I'll need the luck for sure. Well, I'd best leave you to it. I've bothered you plenty enough, so I'll take my leave first. See ya. Once the call was ended, he pocketed his phone, only for Katsumi to bump her shoulder against his. That the Deech who called you out for work? Kachan. What? If he was any smarter, he'd actually thinking about hiring help from some adults, rather than ask some teenage high schooler to do his dirty work for him. It's fine. Seriously. Besides, quite a few members have left his organization, and he's looking to finding some new volunteers to help out. Give him time. I'm sure he'll figure something out. He'd better, or else you'll be stuck doing it for the rest of your life. While she grumbled some profanities under her breath, Izuku laughing all the while, he couldn't help but wonder if that was so bad at all. When classes came to an end, Izuku had gone back home after splitting ways with his friend, who had fervently demanded that he call her when he got there. Any promises made with Katsumi Bakugo was practically a blood pact, and breaking it would come with a number of repercussions that he didn't have the energy nor courage to deal with, so he quickly relented. Once he'd gotten out of his uniform, he'd changed for a simple undyed tee, track breathes and a green windbreaker that he'd gotten as a birthday gift from the Bakugos last year. He had to hold back the smile from popping onto his face as he remembered how it had been handpicked by Katsumi, who had blushed up a storm as she angrily denied such accusations, falling into that typical argument she so often had with her mom. It was cute. Nevertheless, once he'd had his backpack filled with some light food, his favorite water tumbler, insect repellent and sunscreen, he made his way to the door. "I'll be heading out now, Mom." "All right." She waved back at him from where she was sitting in the living room. "Take care." Stepping out of the door greeted him with bright rays and a cool breeze, enough to invigorate him for the lengthy walk and the upcoming task. He took a deep breath in and began his trip to his destination on foot. It wasn't too far from his prefecture, which was probably an act of deliberation done on Sakasuke's part. He'd always been careful not to choose places too far for Izuku, knowing that his mom couldn't exactly drive and wanting to go easy on him on the bus and train fares. He appreciated that, and deigned to work his hardest in each task. Although, the place he was heading to this time certainly made him think as if he'd stepped into a different place altogether, surprise and awe melding together as he quickly looked back at his phone, then at the path he was about to walk down. Talk about a place straight out of a storybook. It was a road leading into a forest. He might have seen it in passing, but had never actually come close enough to check it out himself, too afraid that it'd be dangerous. As it was, though, heroes had patrolled this area and reported it safe for visitors to walk about, though it was safe to stick to the road and head back if there were any uncertainties. Without wasting more time, he began his walk into the forest, where green dominated the scene as far as the eyes could see, mingling with oaken brown that brought a sense of serenity that he had never felt before. The air smelt of wet wood and leaves, gravel shifting as his shoes pressed upon the earth and twigs. The song of birds was a melody pure and unfiltered, and he allowed all 5 of his senses to absorb every detail for as long as he could. It was mesmerizing. If he'd been stressed before, such feelings of weight would have ebbed away like the waves on a beach, leaving him more renewed than anything else. His spirit achieved a calm unlike anything before, and that carried all the way until he reached a torii. Yes, it was an honest-to-goodness torii, painted red with ornaments attached to a rope that hung loose from where it was attached to either pole. There was a scroll at the top where the name was meant to be, but the writing had weathered away, leaving it an unreadable mess. Flowering vines had also crept along the poles, and that made him wonder if it was an abandoned shrine. His questions were answered when he climbed the mossy steps behind the torii gate. Soon, he came upon an old shrine, the kinds of which one would go to pray for good fortune at the beginning of a new year, with its red paint and its impressive arch. Or, it may have been impressive once upon a time, but now its color had dulled, and the paved road leading up to it cracked to let grass grow in between. Dead leaves were scattered about on the ground, and there was dirt and grime on the floor and walls of the shrine. Izuku hummed. Sakasuke had mentioned that he was 30 years old, which meant that this shrine went a long way back to his parents' time. That it had fallen to a state was a bit of a shame, but it was nothing unsalvageable. If some work was done, then this place could look brand new once again. Well, nothing to it then, he nodded his head, grinning. He quickly messaged Katsumi, set his bag down by a stone pillar, then took off his windbreaker and folded it atop his bag along with his phone. He rolled up his breathes and pumped a fist. Let's get to tidying this place up. One might question the need to clean up a clearly abandoned site, but if it meant that someday it could become a tourist attraction once more, then Izuku would be honored to have played a part in its restorative efforts. Plus, he couldn't just not do anything now that Sakasuke had told him about its importance in relation to his parents. With that, he quickly checked out his surroundings. There was a well nearby to draw water with, and there was already an assortment of tools put on the steps outside of the shrine to work with: buckets, mops, brooms, and rags. The few rock pillars would also need some wiping down, as did the shrine interior, for whatever he could help with. Nodding, he got to work, beginning the long and arduous process of cleaning the area. Sweeping the leaves was nothing new to him, and he made sure to pile up every single leaf before moving to the pillars to wipe them down with a wet cloth, happy to watch as the crusted grit slowly faded away, revealing the old gray stone underneath the layer. Even the weeds growing about were plucked and disposed of into a separate trash bag. Then came the shrine, which was admittedly the hardest part. Fortunately, none of the walls or floorboards had broken apart, which made the job of wiping them down manageable. He could work his way down every inch meticulously, the muscles in his arms tensing with every cycl and slide. Granted, it wasn't like the floors would glisten like mirrors at the end of his job, but it was still nice to see the return of color, faded as they were. He worked a brush along the corners of the walls to get rid of webs, the sounds of peak constant throughout. Eventually, as the shade shifted directions and the trees rustled, Izuku sat on the steps and plucked his tumbler, taking a sip of his water. He then tore apart the bread he'd brought along, chewing on it slowly before drinking his water. Again. Shouldn't take too long now. I've probably just got to do the backside afterwards, and maybe make a quick check for any more leaves on the ground. It was surprising enough that he'd managed to do this much by himself, though that was probably thanks to his experience in doing these kinds of jobs before. It was a refreshing change of pace from the occasional back-breaking regimens, though this one was no less tiring. Already, he could feel his body heating up from the work, and his legs and arms were beginning to ache a little. Still, it was all good exercise at the end of the day, and he appreciated that, if not for the betterment of this shrine. And he couldn't wait to see the end product, of which he could then take a photo of to share with Sakasuke. It wouldn't be anything impressive, but it would be a start. And then someday, when the officials would finally take charge in the reparations, this place would be revitalized as a tourist destination. He could already see it, families, children in couples, perhaps in casual wear or in festive kimonos and yukatas, flocking to this area in cheer to celebrate the new year. Perhaps they'd set up small stores to sell little treats too, like candied apples and yakisoba, and a single blink, and the imagined scene faded away like bubbles. He leaned back, resting his weight against his hands flattened against the wooden boards, and spoke out to empty air. The whole point of work like this is to help others. Sometimes in the littlest ways, sometimes in obvious ones. But at the end of the day, people's lives are made better. It seemed absurd to imagine that his work here today, that in cleaning some shrine abandoned in the woods, could possibly help society whatsoever, but that hadn't been his only work so far. He'd done his part in neighborhood cleanups, in volunteers' workshops, in the school cafeteria, in painting murals on the walls of local alleys. If that could help provide a better ambience to the people overall, and perhaps if his habit of doing community service would inspire others to then do the same, then he was certain that that was the best thing one could possibly hope for. He looked once more at the road before him. The stalls and the children and the lights existed once again, and the music was a festive kind of drums and whistles. He could see himself in there, walking amongst the crowd in a kimono alongside his childhood friend, both of them enjoying the festival. The only difference, then, was that she was the only one who succeeded. Plus, if I don't make it into UA, I'd at least have a second option to fall onto. It hurt just saying that out loud, but that was a reality he had made peace with years ago. Even if Katsumi had vehemently egged him into joining her in her exercises, and both of their parents had offered him words of encouragement, he wasn't blind to the possibility that all his hard work might not just be met with the desired outcome. And that was okay. Some people had bad cards dealt onto them. And he was just one amongst hundreds of them. If anything, he counted himself lucky. Quirkless as he was, he'd still gotten the opportunity to be involved in all of these kinds of work. And judging from how well he'd performed in every one of them, he could see a future where he committed himself fully to this position, which wouldn't exactly be saving people in the grandest of ways as heroes do, but in helping the people in their daily lives, bit by bit. That sounded nice. Even if he really wanted to become a hero with Katsumi. Indeed, you are not meant to remain in the shadows, young boy. For you are destined for something far greater than that. As a hero, I mean, that would be nice if it happens, but I just don't want to put the cart before the horse and end up with disappointing myself and, The greenette perked up, then turned his head to look for the source of the voice. It was that of a woman's, gentle and loving that it reminded him of his mom for a second. And yet, the shrine was empty, and looking around he found no one. Quirking a brow, the boy rose to his full height. "Hello," he called out. "Is anyone out there?" Naught but silence met him in return. That left him tense, eyes suddenly scouring his surroundings in search of something out of the ordinary. Heck, he was hoping he'd see another living person, yet all that laid around him was the sea of trees, almost endless that the darkness blended into the creeks without failure. Now, he was sweating, and he couldn't help but inch himself back towards the shrine entrance. This isn't funny. Come out already. Be not afraid, O child of man, the voice spoke once more, and his eyes shot wide as he turned around. For in you, I have found a savior of the land. And I shall be your benefactor. Who? The earth rumbled. Izuku barely had time to do anything before hundreds of birds took to the air, their beating wings a cacophony of noise that sought to drown out all other sound. And yet, to his shock, they weren't flying away, but instead had spun in a cyclone in the sky above the clearing, practically blocking all sunlight and casting the grounds in darkness. The tremors grew stronger. And then there was an actual stampede headed his way, making him stare in the direction of the surrounding woods, the trees themselves swaying with the rush of incoming animals? If one had said that there was some deer rush or something, he might have believed it. But nothing could have prepared him for the splendor that was the charge of every freaking animal in existence. Boars, rabbits, deer, foxes, raccoons, snakes, bears. They pushed past the trees and surrounded the shrine of which he stood nearby, and birds of all colors of the feathers dropped to perch upon branch and structure like a rain of paint, the vast greens now dotted with a spectrum of reds, blues and more. Had the mere sight of prey and predator standing side by side not have been impressive enough, and how not a single wolf was tempted by the hares sitting upon its back was mind-boggling to him, it was then to the trees, coming to life. Flowers bloomed within seconds, as if time had sped up for just that single moment, even more colors dotting the area. Even flowers that were never meant to grow in Japan just came into existence. Izuku's jaw dropped. What the heck was happening? Where had all these animals come from? And why were they all looking behind him? Wait, that was probably a sign, wasn't it? Gulping, he slowly moved forwards, turning his body around to stare at the shrine. On the plus side, there was no way things could get even stranger than this, right? Light flooded the inside of the shrine, anticipation at its peak as he wondered just what could possibly emerge from within. Footsteps. Soft and measured, and a warmth seemed to seep outwards. It wasn't a tangible sense of heat, per se, but the new presence's aura just made him feel soothed. As if everything was going to be. It's a pleasure to finally meet your acquaintance, Izuku Midoriya. The voice that he'd heard moments ago was now clearer, no longer ringing in his head. His eyes looked up to her face, and for a moment, his heart seemed to stop beating for a second. Not a single word could truly describe the immaculate beauty of the woman before him. Nothing but a Greek-esque dress covered her body, of which her buxom figure would have evoked treacherous thoughts in even men of the strongest of wills. To designate her hair by a single color was almost impossible, as it seemed as if a rainbow had flowed into a river that cascaded down her back, pooling at her feet where the hem of her dress hid her feet. Her eyes were of equal spectrums, her smile appealing, and he could swear her very body was aglow. While his brain was too busy taking her in all of her glory, the woman spoke up once more. He who walks the road of a hero, who shall face countless obstacles in his path to achieve such a lofty dream. I speak to you now as your aide, and shall see you reach heights unlike anything seen before. Abawa. Indeed. And it is you that I have found worthy to take my power, that it may bolster you in your fights ahead to shine light upon a world tormented by the sins of man. To make this world a better place for all. Brain frozen as he was, there was still enough clarity to recognize her words, and his features morphed into confusion. Your power? Indeed. Her arms swung outwards, her aura's illuminance growing in intensity, the animals around them going loud and filling the space with sound. I am Ai, the goddess of love. And by my grace, Izuku, you shall save the world, with the power of love. Through the abnormalities and the chaos, through the revelations and his own destiny, through the chorus of the animals, Izuku Midoriya stood there to stare at the supposed goddess. And for so long did he remain that way, until his brain was finally capable of generating a single response befitting such an occasion. What the foo? Prologue 3, Dangers of Spring. The soda fizzled as she sipped from it, enjoying the temporary bite it gave before pulling the bottle away, eyes glued on the TV screen. Not like she was focused on it. It was more background noise than worthwhile entertainment. Whatever drama was playing on the screen right now looked ridiculous, and she'd much prefer doing anything else than this. Well, you can't blame them for being careful. In a school where the kids are bound to get into a lot of injuries, I suppose having health insurance in advance would be a lot safer for the students. True, but it's always scary to imagine just how strenuous it can get for them. Katsumi would have scoffed at the notion, but that it had come from Auntie Inko instead, she already knew how much of a worrywart she was. Plus, she understood where her best friend's mom was coming from. Neither she nor her husband were heroes, let alone had any relatives who'd been in that line of work before, so there was practically zero knowledge on how that worked, and thus a greater worry when it comes to Izuku's safety in trying to navigate these waters. In fact, studies had shown that most kids who make it into the hero schools were often from families with hero backgrounds, making up at least 80% of the total group. That was 80%, not a small number whatsoever. The remaining 20 couldn't be considered outliers, though, as some kids' quirks mutated to become more suitable for combat, though kids with hero parents would always benefit from being trained by them. Still, it was her and Izuku they were talking about. There was no way things could possibly go poorly for either of them. They'd been working their buttes all this time. Sure, the issue that he still didn't have a quirk made things a lot more worrisome, but they'd figure something out. He'd definitely figure it out. It's Izuku after all. The guy was one of the smartest on the planet, second only to her, obviously. There was nothing he couldn't solve. Speaking of Izuku, he sure was taking a while. It was already 7, and he'd messaged her that he'd be back an hour ago. Katsumi was sure he hadn't run off someplace, but that didn't stop her from feeling antsy. As if something had gone missing from her room, and the only thing she could do was have that sense of wrongness wiggle around in the back of her head. She sighed, setting down her soda and grabbing the notebook she'd put aside earlier, flipping the pages. Not hers, Izuku's. He had a series of them, all of which were devoted to studying heroes, and he was often too embarrassed to share it with anyone else besides her, something that never failed to leave her pleased. Calling him smart was an understatement. His observant nature coupled with his inquisitive mind and creativity was on full display within these pages. Each sketch was done with an artist's precision, and countless notes written down about their quirks, costumes, strengths and weaknesses and more. It never got boring to read these, and she had to hold back a smile at seeing the dedication in his work. This alone was a sign that he took heroes seriously. And if he wasn't qualified to be one, then who else was? After some time, though, the doorknob began to twist, and in came the boy of her thoughts. Katsumi would never admit to anyone that she'd been eager to see him again, she really wasn't. And she made sure to call out his name as loudly as possible. "Oh, Izuku. Took you long enough." When the boy didn't respond, she turned to look at him, noticing the way his body was moving on automatic while his head hung low, lips moving to showcase his muttering habit. He was taking off his shoes, but it looked like he wasn't all there. The girl quirked a brow at the sight. It wasn't entirely strange that he fell into his thinking moods, as she liked to put it, but it looked like something was troubling him. Well, his typical rant of heroes and quirks would look a lot more animated, more giddy, compared to this hushed, suspicious murmuring. His shoulders were also slightly hunched, and his expression was dour in a way that he doesn't normally appear. Not a good look from him. She hummed, wondering what could have possibly happened to him while he was out. "Izuku. Oi, Izuku." No response. She grunted, pushing herself off the couch and stomping her way towards him. Even standing in his way, he did nothing but just stay there, mumbling gibberish to himself. Katsumi quirked a brow, then sighed. Without wasting a moment, she slowly took in a deep breath, cupping her hands to her mouth. "Izuku. Kaya. It wasn't me." Fright prompted action as he leapt away from her vicious shouting, verdant eyes wide as platters as his head snapped left and right. It was only when his gaze landed on her did he finally relax, words a stutter. "Kaken?" "Yeah," she scoffed, crossing her arms. "Head in the clouds or something. Really looked like you couldn't give a DMN about nothing else." Sorry. I was just thinking about work earlier. It's a weird story. And kind of an ominous one, I'd admit." "Ominous," He looked to where their parents were, then nodded timidly. The look in his eyes was telling. He didn't want to speak about this in front of the others, more assured if it was kept between the two of them. Katsumi nodded, shooting a thumb over to his room. They took their leave after he'd greeted both of their moms, and when they stepped inside his All Might-themed room, she had to hold herself back from rolling her eyes. Years of growing alongside him was still not enough to help her get over this level of fanaticism. Then again, he was at least idolizing the right hero. She wouldn't have forgiven him if he showed this level of fanboy energy towards some no-name. While she threw herself onto his bed, bodily turning herself to look away from him with her eyes closed while he worked on changing into some casual wear, and silently gulping at the idea that he was probably wearing nothing over there, she spoke up once more. "So? Where'd you been today?" "Well, Sakasuke sent me the address to a forest shrine someplace nearby. It's pretty isolated and it looked abandoned by the looks of it. All I did was just tidy up the place as best as I could and clean up the building. Not like it amounted to much, though I'm assuming some other people will take over to fix the place, I guess." "Alright, then what? Something bad happened there?" "Not bad, but just weird overall." He paused, likely trying to think of a way to convey his thoughts before speaking up once more, his wardrobe coming shut as he slipped on his shirt. "Kaken, I met a fortune teller. Outside of the shrine after I was done with my job. Came out of nowhere." "A fortune teller in some woods?" "Yeah, that sounds like a massive red flag." "What? She came straight for you?" "Yeah. So, this fortune teller, she approached me and told me that she could divine a lot of things. But the one thing she was good at was relationship stuff." He chuckled, sounding nervous. "Of course, I chalked it up to her having some kind of quirk that lets her look into a person's future, so that was always feasible. But I guess I wasn't prepared for her suddenly checking my future." "A divinator specializing in relationships?" Katsumi tensed. "And then?" "Yeah, so, I'm done changing by the way." Katsumi took that as her cue to turn around to look at him. He was wearing a short-sleeved tee and some baggy cargo briefs now, and he moved over to sit near her. She quickly sat up as well, then made room for him. The bed sunk a little with his added weight. "So yeah, I didn't really want to, but then she was insistent, so I just let her do it. And she cursed the stutter in her voice, but found the hole in her gut much too uncomfortable. And letting his words linger in the air made her feel worse, so she dredged up whatever courage she had to keep prodding him. She said that something bad was going to happen someday. Of all the things he could have said, that was one of the least expected ones. Ruby eyes blinked, noticing the deep frown marring his face, and how tense his hands were as they clenched one another, sat upon his lap. "To the girl that I would someday fall in love with. And I'm scared to imagine what that could be." "Izuku. I know, it's silly to think about. I mean, I'm not even in high school yet. I've never looked at any girl in that way before, and the thought of romance is just so far out of my reach." He laughed weakly, his eyes still hard. "But even so, I hate the idea that someone I care for will someday get into serious danger, and I won't know what it is or when it'll happen. But above all that..." His fists tightened. "I'm scared at the thought that I wouldn't be able to do anything to protect her then." The boy fell silent, sniffling once before vigorously rubbing the back of his hand against his hands. Katsumi simply stared at him, realizing just how seriously he was taking this. Her body had already moved before she thought about it, an arm looping around his shoulders to pull him towards her in a firm, one-armed hug. "Hey, it's fine," she whispered in an uncharacteristically gentle tone. "Geez, you crybaby. What are you letting yourself get so worked up for? It's just a prediction, not a fact. You can still do something to change it." "See, can I?" "Obviously. What, you just planning to lie down and roll on the ground, letting it happen? If so, I'd be disappointed because I know you're better than that." When his hand pulled away and he turned to look at her, his verdant orbs glistening from withheld tears, once again did Katsumi come to terms that this was the boy she had become friends with since an entire decade ago, who had chased that distant dream alongside her with a wide smile on his face and a heart of gold. Izuku Midoriya, a hero through and through, even if the world sought to deny him such an opportunity. And that love of his would go out to strangers, his family, his friends, and even hypotheticals. Her mind broke away from those thoughts. She really could lose herself in those eyes that reminded her of the forest and the hills. She felt her heart beat faster, and it took everything she had in her to keep herself under control as she continued. Just believe in yourself a little more, okay? You've always been capable of doing anything when you put your mind to it, so saving that love of your life shouldn't be impossible, right? Kaken. Besides, if it doesn't happen, then it's just obvious that that weirdo you met was just a bozo. Nothing to worry about it. Yeah, you're right. She hated how happy she was when he smiled at her, and that the girl fated for him might not even. Sorry to drag the mood down. I'm such a worrywart, huh? Bah, we've gotten used to it at this point, she scoffed, hoping it hid her weakness. It's whatever. Just don't think about defeat before you've even done anything yet. Got it? Cry all you want only after the fact is done. Never before. I promise. That was simply his nature. No matter how bad things would go, he would be determined to give it his all in facing said challenges. Such conviction was what had carried him through his ostracization all these years, and what enabled him to continue running alongside her as they chased their dreams. And yet, even as they returned to the others, her pops catching Izuku's attention after mentioning the debut of a new hero which instantly had him gushing in excitement, she couldn't help but constantly rewind his words in her head, thinking of the possibility of him meeting his fated one. And a selfish part of her hoped that he may never meet her at all. There was something odd about how negative emotions could always persist longer than positive moods, similar to how a single incident could ruin a person despite their 100 good deeds. And this was just going to be yet another day of that kind. Izuku sighed heavily. School had concluded hours ago, and he hadn't been able to focus on his classes whatsoever. He blamed his meeting he had with AI a couple of days ago. The haunting words she'd planted in his head wouldn't subside no matter how hard he tried to distract himself. Sometime in the near future, something life-threatening will happen to the one that you will fall in love with. You will not be ready for it, but it will be up to you to rise to the challenge if you seek to save them and begin your journey as a hero. Ridiculous as the notion was, that someone like him could even end up finding a girl to fall in love with, the weight behind her words had completely done away any possible humor. She'd never specified the exact time nor location of the eventual tragedy, though, which made him wonder if perhaps she wasn't as divine as she made herself out to be. Or, more likely upon further pondering, she intended it as a test of his mettle. After all, heroes were people who rose against the difficulties in life to save people. And if he couldn't do something as simple as this, what hope would he have against worse evils on the planet? At that point, he'd be better off never pursuing this ideal to begin with. Why he hadn't given up on his dreams, he wasn't sure. He'd already made peace with his quirkless nature, and he'd felt himself adequately prepared to devote himself to the people in other ways. Even if community work might not achieve much, it was still honest work. Or he could pursue the road of doctoring or some other thing. Those were still possible. And yet, Izuku shook his head. Not now, he growled. I can't bog myself down with these thoughts. I need to focus on my present and do what I can. Easier said than done, however, for the weeks leading up to today had been nothing but stressful to him. While he'd kept up with his studies and his training fairly well, he knew he wasn't doing as well as he was before meeting AI, her prophecy making him second-guess everything and keep a closer watch on his surroundings more in case anything happened. He felt stressed. So far, he hadn't stumbled upon some girl that could have possibly been his supposed partner. Hell, the only girl his age that he actively talks to is Katsumi, whereas all the other girls in his class just avoid him. Some tolerated him, but there was nothing to suggest anything more beyond friendship. He paused at that thought. Someone he would fall in love with? There was no way that it could be. No. There's no way. He quickly denied, shaking his head as he began moving once again, face heating up despite himself. Me and her? Fat chance. She's so much more amazing than me. As if she'd ever think of me that way. Saying the words out loud helped reinforce his doubt on the matter, but it also served to make him feel lonely? And not merely lonely, but genuinely upset. His eyes dropped, and his heart felt heavy. The thought of his best friend choosing to leave his side one day to find someone else in her life was... He clenched his fists, only realizing now that they were clammy. It wasn't hot out and he hadn't been running or whatever, yet he could feel his drumming heartbeat, chest tight in discomfort. Why was he like this? Katsumi was an incredible girl. Athletic and smart in equal measures, and appealing to boot. Heck, her rough personality was a charm all of its own, especially when her softer side peeked through in the quieter moments, showcasing the fact that she was more than just what she presented before others. Her smiles, her laughter, her dreams. Everything about her was appealing. He screwed his eyes shut, gritting his teeth. There's no way. I promised to myself that I wouldn't like Katja. What? Careful. He had less than a second to acknowledge the screaming voice headed his way before someone crashed into his back, making him almost fall forwards. He wheeled his arms before planting one foot forwards on the ground to reaffirm his balance, then turned around in panic. Hey, are you okay? Oh, sorry, I wasn't looking where I was going. The girl on the floor was groaning, rubbing the back of her head. Cropped brown hair the color of tea framed a youthful face, with rosy cheeks and eyes the same color as her hair. She was wearing what looked to be the uniform of a different school, and he couldn't help but be drawn to the scarf she was wearing. That motif sort of reminds him of the Hero 13. Wait, now wasn't the time to be distracted. Quickly, he offered his hand to the girl, words falling out in a jumble. Sorry, I blanked out earlier and just stopped moving. Are you hurt? His voice snapped her out of her initial stupor, looking up to meet his gaze. The girl smiled back, pained as he was. I'm fine. Ha. He quickly looked her over. She had her purse with her, and she was wearing skating shoes, which was probably what made her lose control of herself back there, hence the collision. At the very least, she was wearing some protective gear for her elbows and knees, so there was no scraping those. After a while, the girl took his hand in hers, slowly rising with difficulty. Her shakiness was in part because of her skates as it was her prior impact, and he made sure to stand in place until she was stable enough to stand on her own, though he hadn't let go of her hands yet. Sorry and thanks. I was just practicing skating earlier, and I guess I went a little too fast, she giggled, sounding genuinely embarrassed as blood filled her cheeks. Are you all right? Yeah, I'm fine. And it looks like you are too. It doesn't seem like you've scraped your hands or anything. Hey, yeah, guess I got lucky there. Oh, I'm Ochako, by the way. Ochako Uraraka. Nice to meet you. Ochako Uraraka? What a pretty name. He found it odd that he was beginning to feel shy all of a sudden, but he pressed onwards with a smile on his face regardless. Aizuku Midoriya. It's nice to meet you too. Yep. So, was I disturbing you or? No, nothing like that. I wasn't busy. Just taking a quick walk. You live around here? Oh no, I just thought about taking a little quick trip a little far from home today. Didn't think it'd end up like this, though. She whined. So embarrassing. Hey, it's okay. Really. It just happened all of a sudden, so it's no one's faults. Yeah, but I could have easily hurt you. It would have taken a lot more to hurt me. At the raise of her brow, he quickly explained. Oh, I've been working out. To go to UA High this year. Wait, seriously? She gasped, suddenly excited. I'm going there too. What a coincidence. You too. He found himself smiling widely at that revelation. That's great. It'd be nice to have another familiar face in class. That is if we're going for the same course. Hero, Uraraka parroted with a smile, and his grew even wider. Oh, that's so great to hear. Then I'll definitely get to see you a lot more often. Though his words had been spoken with genuine cheer, it took a while before his words finally caught up to his brain, and his eye widened as he stared at Uraraka, whose eyes widened and her blush intensified. I wasn't. I mean, I'd be happy if you were there too, because then I'd have another friend I could tea-talk to. Alright, of course. That's totally it. She laughed a little too loudly. Nothing else to it. Yeah. Ha. Cue the silence. They stood there, still holding hands, yet they fidgeted in place as they looked away from one another. Izuku mentally slapped himself in the face, groaning all the while. Way to go, you dumb idiot. You just couldn't make your first interaction with a new friend completely normal. Now she thinks I'm trying to hit on her. Shaking his head, he smiled back at her, trying hard to will away his flush. So, are you planning to skate somewhere, or go back home? Maybe home. I think I've had enough excitement today. Then what say I walk you home? The girl perked up at that. Just to keep you safe. Wouldn't want you falling or anything. Oh, are you sure? He nodded. Uraraka's smile came back, bright. Hey, sure. I'll take you up on that offer. With that decision made, both students made their journey on foot, the girl skating shakily while she chattered excitedly with Izuku. They knew very little about each other, so they began with talk of their schools and aspirations. At some point, they got into talking about UA High, and it was nothing but utter excitement at the prospect of getting into the same class. Wait, hold up, he needs 5 steps back. How did he get into this situation? And not just that, how was he being this chatty with some girl he'd only just met today? Social anxiety, hello? Where were they? But in this moment he was utterly grateful that his social ineptitude decided to take a back seat for now. Talking with Uraraka was fun. So much more fun than he'd expected. The both of them got increasingly excited when their discussion shifted towards heroes, and 13 in particular was apparently Uraraka's idol, the girl having stars in her eyes as she geeked over the space-themed hero, and he shared his own knowledge about the hero. And through it all, Izuku couldn't look away from her. From the sway of her brown bob, to her rosy cheeks, to her eyelashes batting with every blink, to her silky lips, to her pearly smile. And it wasn't just her appearance that truly caught his attention. In fact, every detail was seared directly into his brain matter. Her melodic laughter, the lingering looks she sent his way, her close proximity to him that should be sending him into a nervous frenzy, yet he wanted so badly to just hold her close. He shook his head. Calm down, man. What the heck's wrong with you? Just because she's cute doesn't mean that you get to have these weird thoughts about her. Wait, There was no time to debate on that even further, because in no time he realized that the both of them had finally arrived at her home. Must have taken an hour, he bet. It was a tall apartment building, with little in the way of decoration or paint job. Some clothes were strung up on the windows, and a man was carrying away a black rubbish bag. He took in the details, then heard the nervous giggle from Uraraka. Sorry that my place isn't all that impressive. What? No, it's fine. I live in an apartment too, you know. She blinked, surprised. You do. When he nodded, she looked much calmer. I see. Sorry. That was kind of mean of me to assume things out of you. It's fine. Most kids who get into hero schools already come from hero families, which are typically well off. It's an obvious advantage for them. I'm not, he chuckled. My dad works overseas as a chef, and my mom takes care of me at home. We're just a normal family. Oh, my parents work in the construction business. Uraraka smiled. Guess we're not so different, huh? Yeah. You can say that, he chuckled. Well, I guess that's that. I should probably be taking my leave. Wouldn't want to keep you held up for so long. The girl visibly deflated at that, and Izuku was shocked when he felt the same. He'd only just met her today. He'd never been this way with people. The only other person his age that he was close enough to ever feel this way would be with Katsumi. Alright, I guess that's right. Thanks, Midoriya-kun. She smiled once more, happy. It means a lot to me for walking me back home. You've been a gentleman. Hey now, it's just called manners. When she giggled back, he could feel his own happiness come back. And hey, it's not like we'd have to be strangers. How about we exchange numbers? Her eyes widened. Oh, sure. He couldn't mistake her joy at his suggestion even if he tried, and he hated how pleased he was. They quickly shared their phone numbers, sending a short text to each other. Cool. Guess we'll be seeing each other soon, yeah? Why, I look forward to it. Me too. He met those chocolate eyes, and there was sincerity in them that took away his breath. How could he have ever felt this way towards another girl? It seemed so impossible, yet he couldn't doubt his feelings. He knew what was going on. Victor. As fantastical as it sounded. Okay. Guess it's time for me to go. He bowed quickly. It's been good to meet you, Uraraka-san. Let's hang out another day. Bye, Midoriya-kun. Bogged down by AI's words for weeks, that was the first time he'd come back home with a smile on his face, and with those traitorous thoughts out of his mind and far, far away. Katsumi, let me treat you to something. Asking that out of the blue might not have helped his case much, especially when his childhood friend was staring at him with bewilderment, but he doubled down on his insistence with a quick nod. I wanted to thank you for your help in training, so I've been saving to treat you. He said. You don't have to. I don't have to, but I want to really sell it. He clapped his hands together in a begging motion. Please, Kaken. I won't be happy with myself if I do nothing. The confusion made way for discomfort, then thought, before she eventually sighed. Fine. But if you think this'll make me go easier on you, then you'll be disappointed. I wouldn't even dare to ask for that, he chuckled. Let's go. Truth be told, this was a little too sudden, especially when they'd just finished their class duties. Katsumi hadn't been happy, especially because they were filling in for a pair of guys who'd been absent today after contracting a bug or something, but it offered him good timing to ask her out for stuff. Plus, he'd been planning to ask her for some time now, so he might as well. And one might wonder where he'd even gotten the money from, and that was courtesy of the community work he'd been doing. They weren't high-paying by any means, but for the sheer number of them that he'd taken part in, his piggy bank was looking pretty good. And he did set aside some for himself, so he was more than okay. Don't ask him how much community work he'd taken part in, though. That detail was better kept secret. Nevertheless, it would be enough to buy her some good food if she wanted. If she was feeling up for it, then he didn't think there'd be any trouble for him to spend extra. It'd be good to repay her for all her help, and it would at least incentivize him to work hard to make up for any amount spent today. But it's nothing to make a big deal of. I get that, but I've never tried to give you anything nice for all your help, he said in return. And that was certainly true. This would be the first time he'd actually spend money to treat her to anything. Really, it's fine. It's not something I'll be doing all the time either, so I don't mind. Judging by the look she was giving him, it was very likely that she was doubting his words, but she opted to just sigh in the end. Alright, I get it. If it'll make you happy. Geez. You're lucky I'm in a good mood, or else this whole thing would be over in a matter of seconds. Thanks. I'm not sure what to ask, to be honest. I'd default on the tried and true choice of a food venture, but we've pretty much tried every place there is. I suppose doing something different would be worthwhile. Sensing her indecision, Izuku whipped out his phone, handing it to her. Then why don't you take a look at this list I made? With the money I have, we'll be able to do quite a number of things, food included. What the? You prepared a whole list. Katsumi sounded like she just scoffed and laughed at the same time. Ding, Izuku, what the heck? You looking forward to this so much or something? He was, though he wasn't going to admit that to her. He just laughed back and followed after her as they made their way down the street, the blonde working her way down his lengthy list. It was only 20 ideas, which ironically made it even harder to decide, with a grumble. But Katsumi was not an indecisive person. It only took her 3 minutes before she eventually made her choice, dragging him over to the busiest street in the city. The neon sign hung over the entrance was a dead giveaway of what it was, and he couldn't help but smile nervously. So it's to the arcade we go? Yeah, the girl paused, looking over to her shoulder to frown at him. But, don't wanna? What? I didn't say that. I was just surprised is all. Shaking his head, he smiled back. It's been so long since we've come here, though, so I'll be pretty rusty. Hope you don't mind. Her grin came to her easily. Like you'd need to worry about that. I've got a feeling you'll do fine. The interior was what he remembered of this teenager-populated place. Loud, bright, and boomy. Like, bass-y boomy. He saw a couple of kids hanging out together to play a game or two, competing either at the racing games or the punching bag, while some families spent time playing the much more calming fishing with their children, or the kiddies' air hockey. Naturally, Katsumi preferred the more violent version, thus purchasing a couple of arcade tokens to slot into the adults' air hockey. She had her disc in hand, and the puck was hers to strike, making her the initiator. He gulped, grabbing his disc tightly and staring at her eyes to predict her next action. "Get ready, Izuku. I won't go easy on you. I don't expect you to. Whenever you're Ari." Before he could even finish his sentence, Katsumi had already struck the puck at an angle to bounce it off the middle wall and straight into his goal, the speed almost beyond what his eyes could track. Thankfully, reflex kicked in and he deftly blocked it in time, allowing it to ricochet and shoot towards her end, prompting her to strike back at him directly at his goal. He, in turn, swept his arm out and shot it to the middle wall. Let it be known that there was no person in the world more competitive than Katsumi Bakugo, of which he now had all the opportunity to experience for himself. His body was moving as fast as it could keep up with her while his brain mapped out his offense and defense, shifting paradigms as quickly as possible to focus on scoring a point. And whether it was luck or skill, the puck bounced at just the right angle to bypass her guarding disc and slip right into her goal, the loud kachuk. A loud declaration of his victory. F dash! She yelled, slamming the table with her fists. How was that so quick? And I was sure I'd block it. Tiny angles, Kaken. Gotta watch for those. Okay, Smarty breathes. I'll show you just what you get for messing with dynamite, future hero who'll kick all villain butt. Their match lasted only 10 minutes, but by how hard they were breathing by the end of it, he felt like he'd just been part of an hour-long run. Despite his exhaustion, he couldn't help but feel pleased at the scoreline, a neat 6-4 that was mostly thanks to his timely defenses. But man, as befitting her nature, Kaken was really aggressive when she struck. Like, rabid dog with rabies level of aggressive. Sorry, Kaken. He didn't mean that in a bad way. He swore it was a comparison made with good intent. DMN it. She wheezed. Fine, that's one win to you. But don't think the next few games will be just as easy. I'll make you work for it. True to her word, every game that came after their air hockey was punishing. Kaken absolutely dominated him in basketball, having height advantage and a great understanding of object trajectory, and though their race on the virtual streets of Tokyo had been neck and neck, she eked out the victory by a couple of pixels, which just put him on a 2-1. The next few games went back and forth, sort of. He'd whacked more moles than she did, she put more oomph into her haymaker on the punching bag, he outdanced her and wrecked her in that music rhythm game. Okay, so that made it 4-3 in his favor. A short-lived victory when she proceeded to beat him in Pac-Man, which made him actually gape. How did he geek that he was lose to Katsumi in Pac-Man of all things? So we're tied? Bro. This isn't satisfying. Such is the consequence of our competitive streak and our competence in mortal gaming. There was a pause, and before he had the opportunity to take his words back, Katsumi broke into laughter. Huh? What was that? Ha! Where'd the Chuyuni come from? Try as he might, he couldn't help but blush at the cringe. I have no excuses. While she busied herself with laughing her butt off, Izuku desperately tried to look for a tiebreaker, though it wasn't like they had much tokens left. His eyes fell upon a claw machine, however, and a light bulb went off in his head. Oh, Kaken, did you wanna give the claw machine a try? Hihiha. Sorry, she rubbed her eye. What's that? Claw machine. We get only one try each to get a reward, and that'll decide the winner. Is that okay? Those are a scam, Izuku. You know it only works if a lot of people play those machines, because the more money put into those BSTRDS, the stronger the grip. Otherwise, it's noodle. Even a baby would be able to grip better than that sorry thing. I know, but we don't have more tokens to use. And not like I wouldn't mind buying some more, though. But even then, there's no other games I can see us playing to break our tie. While he really didn't mind paying extra for another game, he did have an idea he wanted to go with. And Katsumi didn't seem too content on making him pay more, so she relented to his idea with a huff. Fine. Let's see who's got the better luck. Katsumi was skilled. And someone might argue that luck, too, counted as a skill of sorts, though it seemed like both Lady Luck and mathematical probability didn't agree with that. Even when she'd picked out an easy target, her planes adjusted and angle set, the claw had sought to release its target mere moments before it reached the chute. Motherfucker! Izuku, don't lose to this crappy machine. And don't play on mine. You'll obviously have a better advantage. The boy chuckled. She really was hung up on not wanting him to lose and not wanting to lose herself. Still, she'd given him his order, and he'd be demed not to see it through. With that thought in mind, he fed the machine his one last token, its gold disappearing into the shadows. Immediately, a 60-second countdown began on the display, and he patiently maneuvered the claw while leaning to his right and left to gauge the position of his intended target, a mint-colored, floppy, long-eared rabbit. It was sitting, leaning against a blue hippo, and he adjusted the claw to hang directly above his quarry, its metal glistening as it swayed a little. Eventually, as the timer fell down to 10 seconds, and he quickly inspected the angles and potential motions, he surrendered his fate to the odds, pressing on the bright red button and watching as the claw angled downwards. No twists, no turns, just a guaranteed straight descent. When its base bumped into the crown of the rabbit's head, that was its cue to clamp down, trapping its head in its grip. The first part was achieved. The claw moved on to the next part, which was the ascent, preferably with the rabbit still gripped tight. Thankfully, that was exactly what happened, its body lifting off the piles of stuffed bodies and into the air very slowly, where he and Katsumi began watching with bated breaths. Second part was done. Now it was the make or break. The third part, where it would laterally shift towards the chute, and it would either be a slam dunk or a drop halfway. Wait a second, it's reaching the end. Katsumi gasped. Don't drop, don't drop. Kaken, I'm begging you, please don't jinx it. I ain't jinxing it, both of them gasped as its body hit the side of the plastic border. Come on. For a moment, he was about to tweak out if the claw decided to mock him and let go at the very last second, which would have made this entire thing moot. But then its head passed the border, and then the rest of its body, hovering over the pit. And then it dropped straight down and bumped. Right against the rewards flap. Yes. You did it, Izuku. All right. With a clap of their palms against each other, Izuku bent over to pull out his hard-earned prize, smiling at how soft it felt. This was an unnaturally good quality for a claw machine reward, and he couldn't believe that he'd managed to win such a good plushie. A sigh to his right drew his gaze to his friend, though the smile on her face was as pleased as she could have possibly been. Well dang. Looks like today's little trip ended in your victory. A close call though. If you'd been any more reckless, it would have been my win today. It sure would have. Not that I mind, though. Today was fun, and he could tell that she wasn't lying to him. That knowledge filled him with immeasurable mirth. It was a good idea to mention this as a suggestion. It's been way too long. Yeah, it has. Yeah. Well, now that that's over, let's get out of here. The buzz is killing my ears. He nodded, joining her in the much more peaceful outdoors. They shared a sigh of relief, happy to be freed from the wild arcade, and the sight of the evening sky was a pleasant thing to just focus on rather than a bunch of flashing lights. It took some time, but they eventually reached Katsumi's house, Izuku having insisted on walking her home first before he walked the way back to his. He always relied on the excuse that it was good exercise, despite all her prior complaints. That was when he finally called for Katsumi to stop before she entered her house, the girl quirking a brow. Yeah? What's up? I wanted you to have this, he said, holding up the plush rabbit. Despite the cold wind blowing by, he couldn't help but feel heat bleed into his face when he did, but he trudged on regardless. I wasn't really sure how to do a tiebreaker. But then I saw that claw machine, and I thought it would be nice to win you something. Eh? Wait, seriously? When he nodded back, the girl blinked. Oh, she muttered. Ruby eyes moved towards the rabbit, and under the glow of the street lamp that just lit up, he could make out the faint scarlet in her face. JG's. You didn't have to, you know. I know, but I wanted to. It's not enough to repay you for, well, everything, but at least it's a start. I can't just not take it now that you want me to have it. She groaned out loud. And then, she extended a hand towards him, baring her teeth at him, trying her damnedest to look annoyed when he knew she was feeling anything but that. But I'll take it, just so that you don't complain about it. Hee, thanks, Kaken. Hurry up, give it here. Izuku wasn't sure what to make of the fact that he was giving a plushie to his childhood friend, who was notoriously boyish in her mannerisms and preferences. She would sooner be dead than be caught in a skirt, though that one visit had certainly been a lovely accident. Thanks, Auntie Mitsuki, but there was no denying the fact that, at the end of the day, she was still a girl. Armed with that knowledge, it still didn't prepare him for the sight of his best friend, Katsumi Bakugu, flushed in the face as she was, to be clutching the rabbit to her chest. Its head blocked her lips, her eyes averted slightly in a shy manner. It was a sight that left him at a loss for words, his heart beating faster. Holy shit. So this is Gapmo. The discovery of a lifetime. He would never say that out loud though. Not if he wanted Katsumi to kill him. Thanks. Her voice was softer than it had ever been, and it snapped him out of his stupor long enough to witness the typically loud girl in a rare state of quiet. For today, and this. It's okay. Really? Right. This was getting awkward. Clearing his throat, Izuku offered a smile towards the blonde. Guess that's it for now then. I'd best get moving, or else it'll get really dark. See you tomorrow? Yeah. She met his eyes. See you tomorrow. There was nothing else to be said as far as he could tell. He waved at her and began his walk back home, feeling that familiar heat in his chest. The night was a peaceful one. The distant sound of cars was a familiar background noise that accompanied him as he worked pencil to paper, his homework being completed one by one. There were only 3, though each one were voluminous on their own, so that was that. The scritch-scratch came to a halt as he sat back in his chair, eyes looking out of his window and taking in the night sky. There was nothing in particular to be seen beyond the hundreds of sparkling dots, and he thought he could have lost himself in just looking at them. Not for the first time, Izuku felt lost, though not in an existential sort of way. In fact, it was now a new matter altogether, the matters of the heart, which he had never thought would be a legitimate concern that he would be dealing with in this lifetime. Romance? What the heck? How is that my biggest concern now, of all things? AI's words still worried him. He had no clue just whom his fated ones, and he still couldn't help but balk at the prophecy of more than one lovers, were, and whether or not he'd have the strength necessary to undo such a terrible fate. Still, after everything thus far, he trusted Katsumi's words. He might not be perfect, but he had to believe in his own ability to make things happen. The girl I love. Could it be? Questions lingered in the back of his mind, and he returned to his work. Perhaps one of these days, he'll actually have it all figured out, preferably without anything bad actually happening. And like a jinx, bad happened in a spectacular way. Prologue 4, Spring is the season of heroes. This is the last prologue, I promise. Another day, another beginning for every soul on Earth. A morning routine could look like a lot of things. Most people would probably spend 5 minutes trying to get out of bed, get into their shower, munch down their bread and finally head for school or work. Some were diligent and punctual, others more lethargic and slower. Typical as things could be, and more than good enough. Izuku's went more or less the same, though he always made sure to get up at 6. The cold floor would be more than enough to jolt his systems into rousing wakefulness, and then he'd put himself through pre-exercise warm-ups for 5 minutes, maybe 10 if he was feeling sluggish, before getting into the bath to cool himself off. And then he'd get dressed and join his mother at the dining table, whereupon he was treated to the sight of omelets alongside orange juice. Whoa! This looks good, Mom. Thanks, Izuku. I've been practicing, and I thought about trying something different. Well, knowing you, it was always going to turn out great. Thanks for the meal. After breakfast, he'd help put the dishes in the sink before kissing his mom on the cheek and leaving the house first, her lovely, take care, chasing him into the streets. He took a deep whiff of the air, and not for the first time, he could always appreciate spring being the best weather out of the 4, even if he saw the charm of the other 3. But in his opinion, nothing beats spring. Nevertheless, with a pep in his step, the quirkless boy made his way towards Aldra Junior High, a school he was undoubtedly looking forward to saying goodbye. Not like he'd made the best of memories there, but it would also signify the end of his life here and the beginning of a brand new one. And he was more excited on keeping his focus on the brighter side of things, rather than the alternative. Before, he would have used the train, as school was pretty far from his home. But with motivation to use the trip as an exercise, he'd foregone it completely ever since, more than happy to make the whole distance on foot. By the time he arrived, it was 7:30, giving him just around 15 minutes before classes started. Tens of students were gathered at the gate, bottlenecked as they were slowly checked by the prefects for any poor dress code. Groans aplenty could be heard, but the prefects barely cared, more intent on keeping true to the school rules than bend to the whims of their peers. Speaking of peers, he saw a head of blonde hair near the gate, the girl in question leaning against the wall outside a fair distance away. She had her eyes on her phone, but something must have clued her on his presence, for red orbs lifted to meet his in a moment, widening for a short moment before a grin flitted on her face. Definitely took your sweet time, huh? Hey now, this is my normal speed. Way better than when I first started, am I right? Sure. She kicked away from the wall, joining him as they walked into the school compounds. A prefect looked ready to stop the blonde to correct her dress code, but after a moment of hesitation, made the decision to just look away, not wanting to stir the hornet's nest that is Katsumi Bakugu. Seriously, though, I'm impressed that you're willing to walk the whole distance. Your place is freaking far from here. Well, I got used to it. You definitely did. Plus, you don't even look worse for wear. Talk about a reservoir of stamina. Perks of both training and community work. Hours of rigorous workouts or physical tasks outdoors would do that to a person. And when one is subjected to such things almost on a daily basis for a year, his volunteerism, on the other hand, had taken root much longer than he could remember, results were to be expected. They entered their classroom and took their places, chatting about the heroes Mount Lady and Kamui Woods to pass the time. Izuku in particular was curious to know how their quirks worked, while Katsumi was quick to dismiss them as clout chasers, and boasted about her power being much cooler. Typical Katsumi behavior. When their homeroom teacher finally arrived, it was business like always. The lessons were a bit of a bore, even though they were about to graduate from this place sometime soon. Still, he wasn't going to make a fuss about it. Katsumi was doing plenty of that already. The rest of the day went by like a routine. Classes, lunch, more classes, another reminder from their homeroom teacher to carefully consider their future careers, and then dismissal. Since it wasn't their turn for class duties, they were free to pack their bags and take their leave, planning an excursion downtown to look for cats. And maybe get food. At least, that was the plan until some guy from their class stepped right in front of them, blocking their path to the exit. Flanking him on either side were two other guys, both smirking while their de facto leader gave a gallant smile. At least, that was what Izuku thought his image was meant to be. He looked more threatening than charming. "Hello, Katsumi-san," he greeted. Yaka was his name, Izuku recalled. Heading home. Both teenagers exchanged glances before they looked back at him. "Obviously," scoffed the blonde. "So move out of the way. I don't got time for nobodies." Now, what's the rush? Surely you've got some time you could spare for a friend, right?" "Friend?" A snort escaped her, making both Yaka and his buddies frown. "Like I'd ever associate myself with a loser like you. Now move. I'm tired of your voice already." Katsumi pushed forwards, but Yaka simply moved backwards to keep the distance, still blocking the doorway. His friends fanned out a little wider, all three of them generally displeased. "Now, Katsumi-san, I know this might seem like we're trying to pick a fight with you, but I assure you that it isn't our intention to do so. We just want to invite you out." His smile came back, plastic. "For a bit of fun, yeah? Your definition of fun probably involves karaoke and cigarettes. Not interested. You're playing hard to get. And you're being a fing dickhead. Get out of my way." Without warning, she finally shoved him out of the way, stomping out into the halls. Izuku hastened to follow her, rubbing her back while a slew of curses slipped from her lips. And that would have been the end of it if it weren't for Yaka's muttered words, barely a whisper. What a beach! One of them was first to stop moving. And then they were the first to turn around and walk back towards Yaka, who was just about to head back inside the classroom until they gripped him by the shoulder, prompting him to turn around in surprise. Izuku frowned, his free hand clenched in a tight fist that he could feel his nails digging into his palm. Take that back. What do you want, freak? I don't got time for. I told you to take that back. His outburst had definitely shocked him and the others, and Izuku was not entirely sure where that flare of rage had come from. All that he knew was that his body and mind were working against logic, and he let them do so. Don't call Kakin a beach. She's a great person, and I won't have you insulting her. Surprise eventually eroded into anger. The taller boy effacined his shirt as he growled back. Buzz off, Deku. You're nothing. You're even worse than a piece of horseshit. If Izuku had been any less patient of a man, he might have just decked him in the face. Someone else had beaten him to the punch, literally, though to call it an explosion was far more fitting. Because the next thing he knew, there was a flash of light before fire erupted before their very eyes, the force carrying through and sending Yaka flying out of his grip and down the corridor to his right, doing a poor imitation of a bouncy ball as he flipped and turned in the air before skidding against the cement floor. His landing position was like a warped pretzel, and his body twitched as his mouth foamed, effectively knocked out. Silence. And then, a series of tinier explosions as all eyes snapped towards the perpetrator, whose scarlet eyes burnt with murder, teeth gnashing in a way that would have grinded stone. So, anyone else wants to F with Izuku? Huh. She looked around as she asked that, and not for the time in his life, he had to wonder if Katsumi had been joking when she considered putting murder in her future hero name. That was easily the scariest thing I had ever seen of you. And I've seen plenty. Oh, buzz off. If I didn't do that, I'm pretty sure he would have put his fist in your face. The twat deserved it. He couldn't but flinch at her slur, both impressed and concerned by how diverse her cursing vocabulary was getting by the day. Even her mom swore half as much as she did. Nevertheless, what was done, and the fact that they got away with it without detention spoke of utter miracles. That, and the fact that the other students were more than eager to back her up by calling Yaka the initiator, even if Izuku had technically been the first person to touch him. He felt bad about that, but at the same time, the satisfaction of seeing him getting his just desserts was immeasurable, and he hadn't bothered playing saint when Katsumi asked him if she shouldn't have done that. Good that we're on the same wavelength, but I've gotta ask why you did that. What happened? Called you a beach. His friend paused, either caught off guard by his swearing, or that he heard him at all. Seriously? The hallway was noisy as heck. I didn't hear anything. He did say it though. I heard him whisper under his breath when you left the classroom. He frowned, hands clenching bag straps tightly. I didn't like it when he called you that. That was just so wrong. You're nothing like that. Her surprise lasted for a little longer, before eventually she smiled at him. Geez. Feels like you're even more insulted than I am by that. But thanks, appreciate that. Yeah, no, it's okay. Honestly, who was he to just call Katsumi names? If he'd been the target of Yaka's insult, then he would have taken it on the chin. Name-calling was nothing new to him, and he'd experienced worse. That he'd instead chosen to spew such a word at Katsumi was. He shook his head. It was a rage he'd never felt before, and he recognized how ugly it was. But it felt right, if only because he really couldn't tolerate such disrespect towards the girl he man. Stop thinking like that. He shook his head, chancing a discreet look towards Katsumi, who was already walking ahead of him with her arms folded behind her back. You've already made your decision. There's no point in even entertaining that thought anymore. She's too far out of your reach. The sooner he accepted that, the better it would be for the both of them. He knew his role, Izuku, her childhood friend who shared her dreams, and who would become a hero alongside her. That was who he was. That was enough. Wait, is that you, Midoriya-kun? Awa. Blinking out of his stupor, his head turned to the source of the voice, which sounded strangely familiar to his ears. Confusion broke into surprise at the sight of rosy cheeks and brown hair, the girl dressed in a school uniform he was unfamiliar with. But that face was not one he would be forgetting anytime soon. Uraraka-san. It is you. Her smile came right as she jogged over to him, bringing a smile to his face as well. Thank goodness I got the right person. It would have been awkward otherwise. What gave it away? I'd bet it was the hair. Definitely. She giggled. Your green hair really stands out in a crowd. And you don't often see this color of hair round these parts, so I was pretty confident that it was you. And turns out I was right. How've you been? Great. And you? Just peachy. Nothing crazy has happened, so there's nothing to share. Guess you got done with school. Yep. How about you? Just finished. School finished earlier than usual, so I'd just been walking around town, getting my steps in. It was honestly pure coincidence that I ended up here, of all places. And meeting you here too. Hiya. Guess the world works in mysterious ways. Exactly. Hold up, what's going on here? Their conversation was cut short by the blonde, who had a suspicious look aimed at the brunette. And who are you, for the matter? Oh, right. Sorry, I suppose I should introduce the both of you to each other. First, he gestured towards the blonde. Uraraka-san, this is Katsumi Bakogu, my childhood friend. And Kaken this, he then gestured to the brunette, is Achiko Uraraka. I met her a couple days ago while I was out on a walk, and we just talked about stuff. But you actually talked to a girl on your own, and actually befriended her. Hey now, I know I'm a massive introvert, but He paused, then sighed. No, you're right. That's sort of crazy when you think about it. Even he had been impressed with himself that night. Years of being so socially awkward that his only friend was just one person, to somehow making a new friend on his own. That was an achievement unlike any other, and he'll be taking that win to the grave. In any case, you said you were just walking around town, Uraraka-san? Want to join us? We'd be happy for the extra company. Wait, really? I wouldn't be intruding. Sure you wouldn't. In fact, we were thinking about getting lunch, and maybe see some cats. We'll see how that goes, so it'd be nice to eat together. The more the merrier. You're inviting her to join us? Katsumi asked, sounding oddly irritated. Yeah. This'll be a good chance for us to get to know each other better. Plus, she told me that she's also planning to go to UA High. That's another familiar face. So what? She rolled her eyes. We don't need any extras. Before he could get his word in, Uraraka bumped her shoulder against his, smiling sweetly. Actually, I'd be interested to know more about you too. I think I'll take you up on that offer, Midoriya-kun. Her gaze then moved to his best friend, her smile widening. And I hope we can get along, Bakugo-sen. Beach, don't go acting all friendly with me. It's gross. Oh, don't be like that. This is a great opportunity to know my future classmates. Buzz off. Okay, something was definitely going wrong, and he was the only out of the loop. Not like it was presented in that way whatsoever. Uraraka was being her friendly self and Katsumi was being standoffish as usual. Nothing so out of place, as he knew his childhood friend could be pretty brutish towards other people, but the fact that Uraraka was tanking her scorn without falter was honestly impressive. Still, there was this tension in the air. And he had to wonder if it was between Uraraka and Katsumi, one smiling with eyes closed and the other glaring openly at her as if trying to burn her with heat vision. He wouldn't even be surprised if sparks went flying between them. Is there something I'm missing here? Oh, who am I kidding? There probably is, and I'm an idiot for not knowing what it is. Still, as he dug into his chocolate mint ice cream, humming at the lovely blend of sweetness and refreshing air, he couldn't help but appreciate the place they were in. It was an ice cream parlor that he'd looked up the night before. Pastel colors decorated the walls in the form of paintings, and little decorations in the shape of animals hung from the ceiling. No trash could be seen whatsoever, the workers diligent in keeping the place clean and serving their customers their scoops. Overall, he made the right choice. Uraraka had been excited, stating her longing to come here someday with her parents, and Katsumi simply shrugged back, acting nonchalant about the whole thing. She wasn't a fan of sweets to begin with. Her tune immediately changed when he told her this place sold spicy ice cream, which, when one thought about it, sounded like a really impossible thing. But nope, it was a thing, and he recalled reading somewhere that there was an ice cream so hot, so spicy, that someone actually had to sign a death waiver for it. And by God, he will do his best to make sure Katsumi doesn't find out about it. They would be doomed otherwise. Thankfully, this was nothing as bad as Respiro del Diavolo, or Devil's Breath, though Katsumi was definitely surprised by the kick it had. So that was a win. Deciding to break the ice. In an ice cream parlor, first, he cleared his throat before speaking to his new friend. So, Uraraka-san, you said you were planning to head to UA, right? Will you be with a friend? Oh no, it's just me. Which is such a relief that you two are going too, she beamed his way. I was afraid that I'd be all on my own, so having some familiar faces will definitely make me feel less terrified to go to school. Ah, he smiled back, feeling his heart do a somersault. Not the time. Yeah, that's good to hear. So you're going to UA too. Big deal, Katsumi waved her off. Unless you've got an awesome quirk like me or the brains like Izuku, then you'll probably just get rejected. You don't even look all that impressive to me, so good luck trying to impress the staff there. His head snapped towards Katsumi, mouth agape in shock, then back towards Uraraka, of whom he could imagine a bright red tick mark on her forehead. Even her smile had become tense. Oh, I don't think that's how heroes work, you know. You're not supposed to be good at only fighting bad guys. Course you have to be. Otherwise, you're just going to have your butt kicked, and that makes you useless. Being only good at fighting. If that's the case, you wouldn't even need to be a hero. Pretty sure that's more of a guard dog's work. Whew. Ruby eyes burnt as they focused on her hand close to shattering her cone. In fact, Izuku could make out the faint scent of ozone coming from her hands. You wanna say that again, Beach? A hero has to be skilled in a lot of things. Combat is one of them, but if that's all you're ever good for, then you won't get far as a hero. In fact, you'd be so much better relegated to thug work, Uraraka shot back. Beach. An explosion bloomed within the store. Well, that was what his panicking brain had just helpfully envisioned for him when he saw the smoke hissing from his friend's other palm, her teeth grating back and forth as she glared at Uraraka, who was only staring back undaunted. If looks could kill, theirs would have eradicated mankind as they knew it. Okay. You guys are sure getting friendly. His laughter was nervous. He knew he had to intervene before someone here was getting murdered. And he was shocked that he couldn't tell whether it was Katsumi or Uraraka who would be getting their heads done in. Anyways, how about we tell a bit of ourselves? You know, learn a bit of our backgrounds and the like. Thankfully, he managed to catch Uraraka's attention, quickly looking to him with interest. Katsumi let her go with a grunt. I'll go first. I come from a family of 3, and his life wasn't anything to write home, bar the quirkless part which he chose to keep quiet about. A part of him wasn't ready to spill that part to everyone outside of his family and Katsumi's, and an even bigger part of him feared the response he would get from Uraraka. She was his first genuine friend in a long time, and if he could hold on to that for a little longer, he'd be happy. Nevertheless, he talked about his mum who worked as housewife to keep him fed and clothed every single day without fail. He talked about his fire-breathing dad who traveled the world, honing his culinary arts and served various kitchens across the globe. He talked of his dreams and Katsumi's of becoming heroes, long inspired by All Might, their idol. He talked of his interest in studying quirks of all kinds of people, something that Katsumi interjected with a mention of his intellect, something that had him blushing up a storm. What? It's true. You're the smartest guy I know. There's no one I know who can pick apart a quirk just from seeing it. You even come up with ideas for techniques and support gear to complement them, which isn't something most people can pull off. Ah, Kaken. Stop, it's embarrassing. But it's nothing to be embarrassed about, the brunette said firmly, pumping her fists. With a skill like that, I'd bet that you'd have no trouble figuring out which quirk is best for which situation. That's incredible. Demed right you are that he's amazing. Also, shut up. What? But you just agreed with me. Exactly. That I agreed with you at all makes me want to The blonde rolled her eyes, while Uraraka stuck her tongue out at her. Guess it's my turn. I've just got my pops and the hag. Katsumi calls her mom that, but she's really sweet. A pain in my butt, more like. Anyways, Izuku practically summed it up best. We've been dreaming of becoming heroes since we were kids, and now we're a few weeks away from seeing it happen. She slapped her hands against the table, grinning viciously. And all the losers are gonna get caught with their breeds down once they realize just how incredible the two of us are. Our entire year's gonna get smoked. Ah, I see. That's nice. Having a dream to share together. Yeah. And what about you? What's your lame backstory? Kaken. He sighed. What? I'm letting her talk. I know you are, but be a little nicer to Uraraka-san. No, it's okay. Even if she's a prick, she's not wrong. She bravely ignored the blonde's curse. My childhood isn't anything special, and I grew up in the Mie prefecture. I have no siblings, so it's just me and my parents. My mom and dad own a business in construction, and it's not exactly in the best of places. Plenty of competition and people just not looking to them for work. So our financial isn't the best. Even when her expression had been unchanging all throughout, he could make out the flash of guilt across her expression, which had his heart clenching in sympathy. Even Katsumi was quiet, showing a rare moment of respect towards the other girl. I wanted to get into the family business, because my quirk's absolutely suitable for the job. It lets me levitate things when I touch them, you see? But they told me that they wanted me to be happy. To chase after my dreams instead. Her laughter was weak, almost sad despite the smile on her face. So, that's why I'm here. To be a student at UA High, and become a great hero. Uraraka-san. Plus, a hero's salary is said to be one of the highest of any existing jobs. So if I become a hero, I can rake in the dough and help out my mom and dad. Her gaze moved towards them, smile weak. Kind of lame, huh? You two want to be heroes to help people, and here I am, wanting to make money. That's... DMN. You're a effing idiot. If Izuku had been drinking something, he would have definitely been spewing that all over the table. Both he and the brunette stared at Katsumi in shock, the girl looking unapologetic whatsoever. First off, you got us wrong. Izuku wants to be a hero to help people. I'm in it for the fame. She punched a thumb into her chest. I will immortalize my name in the history books for years to come, and if that means becoming a hero, then I sure as hell will become one. And then all the villains will fear my name, and they'll think twice before considering something stupid. K-Kak, and that's... And two, so what if you're in it for the money? The words caught them both off guard once more. You make it sound like a bad thing, but it's a fact that heroes make significantly more than most occupations. It's because it's one of the most dangerous jobs there is. Granted, it ain't so bad nowadays, but there's always opportunity for something really dangerous to happen, which would then make heroes and the police force pivotal in taking charge. Plus, a hero's schedule isn't a 3 hours thing. It's a whole FING day, and that might extend to the entire week if a dumbass thinks he could start some trouble on the streets. Plus, you're not in it for the money for yourself. It's for your parents. You wouldn't have gone through the hassle of telling us your whole sob story if you weren't sincere in your intent in becoming a hero. So I say, the haters, she jabbed a finger towards Uraraka. Do what you want. Be selfish. Though even you're not selfish enough since you want to help. Your family. That makes you 10 times better than all the pretenders. Remember that. Keikaken. But Kogu-san, don't get me wrong. That's just my opinion. And there was the defensive Katsumi, suddenly flustered at the amazed look in the other girl's eyes. Just don't cry to me if things go wrong for you or anything. I'll just laugh in your face if it does. I see. So, as long as my intentions are right, then... Uraraka paused, then beamed, the weight on her shoulders lifted. Thank you, Bakuga-san. That means a lot to me. Shut up. I wasn't saying all that to help ya. Now you're just annoying. Izuku, help me out here. Izuku did not, in fact, help her out. Instead, he was content with watching the two bicker. Well, Uraraka was thanking the blonde, while Katsumi was spewing expletives back at her, with a smile, genuine joy and relief pooling in his chest at their exchange. Katsumi was many things, but she wasn't a bad person as much as some people may think otherwise. She had mocked Uraraka not for her intentions, recognizing how noble it was of her to want to help her parents, and had instead encouraged her in her own way. A lot of insulting, cursing, and barely recognizable yet genuine encouragement. At some point, as their conversation grew lighter and the girls were even throwing teases at one another, Izuku laughing all the while, he could feel nothing but absolute joy. Everything around him had disappeared, and all that he could focus on were the two girls he was listening to, feeling almost soothed by their presences. His childhood friend, and the first person he'd befriended in so long. It was so incredible, and he couldn't believe that he was so lucky to have known the two of them. Now, he wanted to see that future of the three of them making it into UA together, going to classes, sharing a table at the cafeteria, training, going on outings like today, laughing over a stupid movie. And Izuku, for the first time in his life, was shocked by how strongly he wanted such a thing. And the emotions he'd thought he would shelf forever came brimming at the fore yet again. He glanced towards Katsumi, clicking her tongue. Her blonde hair was done back in a messy bun, the rest falling down her back and shoulders like a river. Her black jacket went so well with her complexion, and he couldn't help but focus on her sharp eyes and the gleam of her lips, watching as they moved as she said something. He had lost himself in looking at her more times than he could count, and he wanted to stare at her all day even now. And then he stared across the table, to where Uraraka was laughing at something her fellow girl said. Her rosy cheeks gave her such an adorable look, helped by her round, cute eyes and those eyelashes that fluttered with every blink. Her shoulder-length hair framed her face nicely, a faint scent of lavender shampoo wafting from her being that drew him in. Even in her uniform, she looked cute, and he couldn't look away even if he wanted to. After a while, he buried his arms, groaning. "Bro, you're down bad. What's with you?" Looking at them wasn't helping. In fact, the more he did, the harder his heart throbbed in his chest. Was he suffering a heart attack or something? And what were these treacherous ideas in his head? Texting one another on Sunday nights? Going out on trips? Holding hands? A minute. It wasn't supposed to be like this. He'd promised himself that he wasn't, that he... The wall in front of him exploded, and his entire body lurched out of his seat. He struck the floor, the side of his head striking the tiles, and the world went black. The first thing he felt upon waking up was the tightness in his chest, and a burning pain that lanced across his entire body. A headache rampaged his skull, unapologetic. He felt heavy like lead, the taste of copper on his tongue. Afterwards, his consciousness constantly swam, as if he was hopping between being awake and not. The world made sense, and it didn't, and darkness danced around the corners of his vision, like thorny vines that were threatening to entangle him in blindness forever. He felt sick. He wanted to throw up. Against strain and the throbbing headache, he twisted his body and forced his palms against cracked tiles, pushing himself up so that he was on his hands and knees. And then, with 1 foot affirming purchase, he slowly rose, breathing heavily all the while. "Kaken?" He called out weakly, eyes squinted as he tried to make sense of his surroundings. "Uraraka-san?" Neither girls responded. They'd just been there, sitting at their spots and talking with one another. Now, the table was completely flipped on its head, the chairs haphazardly scattered with a massive, gaping hole in the wall they'd sat close by. Some were even shattered to pieces. Debris pooled on the floor, and as the ringing in his ears slowly died away, he could make out dampened screaming from his surroundings. Groaning, Izuku slowly stepped out through the hole in the wall, clutching his left arm and feeling how dull it was. Still, it couldn't possibly be a dislocation, but it certainly hurt quite a bit. Maybe he'd gotten it scratched on something, or he'd been lying on it for too long. Even so, none of that mattered. What mattered was finding his friends. Something wrong had happened, and he needed to make sure they were safe. Their lives took precedence above all else. A rumbling explosion in the distance caught his attention, spotting fire and smoke from an alley. Was something going on over there? There were so many people over there, and curiosity drew him in like a moth to the flame, though the flames in this scenario were entirely real and not metaphorical. There was a crowd at the mouth of an alley, held back by tape. And by tape, he realized that it was water-mimicking tape blocking a cordon section, and he found a hero that looked like a fire extinguisher, backdraft, if he recalled, warning them to stay away. The shadow over his head shifted, and he looked up to find an enlarged Mount Lady staring down at the scene in dismay, with Kamui Woods standing on her shoulder uncertain. Other heroes were there as well, all hesitant, staring down a massive body of sludge. And then he saw her. And his heart properly froze for the first time. It was as if a person was trying to tear themselves out of tar. Her arms were flailing about, explosions popping out of her palms as she forcefully tried wrenching herself free. The mass of murky sewage filth had cruel eyes and a wide smirk, looking completely unaffected by the chaos rampaging inside of it, but was instead mocking the heroes with a loud, hoarse voice. "Ka! You heroes really are useless when there are hostages involved. Key word here is hostages with an S. That's right, I've got myself 2 cute little girls." A massive explosion interrupted him, and his body ballooned outwards from the force of Katsumi's attack. He gulped it down, sighing in annoyance. Make that 1 cute girl and 1 volatile little brat, but whatever. I've got me 2 hostages, and none of you will be messing with me. Kihaha. Ice crept in his veins at the declaration, Izuku staring in horror as Katsumi struggled vainly in the mud's clutches. Scarlet eyes, though fierce, held an underlying tone of desperation. She searched left and right for something to help her, her voice hoarse as she continued to curse at the villain, her hands releasing explosions periodically. But Izuku knew her best. He'd known her since the day he was born. And right now she was screaming for help. Sometime in the near future, something life-threatening will happen to a girl that you will fall in love with. You will not be ready for it, but it will be up to you to rise to the challenge if you seek to save her and begin your journey as a hero. Izuku's chest felt tight now. He was breathing heavily now, he realized, Ming words ringing in his head like a raucous bell. He couldn't see nor hear anything but the horrid scene before him, and the more he stared at the villain, the worse the sight became, especially when he could make out another blurry silhouette in his body, writhing about, her brown hair visible within the inky darkness. Uraraka was drowning. His eyes darted behind him, hoping that a hero would take action to save the both of them. And just as a scream for help was about to leave his lips, "Damn it! None of our quirks are suitable for this situation. Are there any other heroes on the way? We called for backup, but we haven't gotten any responses yet." Damn it! Seriously? This is bad. What do you mean your quirks aren't suitable? He thought hotly, gritting his teeth. You're heroes. You're supposed to be able to save people in need, no matter the circumstances. But none of them were moving. They were more focused on keeping the civilians away from the scene, and to prevent the villain from making a sudden escape. Everyone was at a standstill, not a single one doing anything to break the pause. And with every second that ticked by, Uraraka and Katsumi were dying, trapped in the villain's clouded body. Every second gone, the less oxygen they were getting, the more they were getting crushed. This couldn't be happening. All of this was just some bad dream. He'd fallen asleep in the ice cream parlor, and his 2 friends were still talking with one another. They were safe. They were happy. Sometime in the near future, something life-threatening will happen to a girl that you will fall in love with. You will not be ready for it, but it will be up to you to rise to the challenge if you seek to save her and begin your journey as a hero. And AI looked him in his eyes, almost challenging him. The only question that remains is, are you ready? He wasn't. And he ran. Izuku didn't know how it happened. Fear had him frozen to his spot as he witnessed his 2 friends slowly die out right in front of him, almost like a horror movie reel. Everything was stiff, locked, kept in check. Dread thicker than pools of oil clogged his throat and left him struggling to breathe. And then he was running. His legs were pumping their hardest as heat blasted at him from either side, smoke in his lungs and the fires hot. His eyes watered, but his body moved regardless of the consequences, his mind focused on only one thing. And that was saving his friends, no matter what. Adrenaline surged in his system as he leapt at the villain, the distant shouts of the heroes becoming white noise. 1 second, he was in the air, and the next his hands sunk into thick sludge, reaching deep inside. Yo, what's this scrawny-looking kid doing? You want to be my hostage too? He cackled. By all means. That's not what I'm doing. He screamed back, trying to find purchase with his feet as his arms were suddenly being pulled into the villain's body. I'm trying to save my friends. This was worse. So much worse. It felt like he was moving his hands in water, but the resistance he met was even greater, almost as if he was moving 8 times slower than he would normally. And yet, he focused on Katsumi's eyes, which were now wide in disbelief as she stared at him. And Izuku, in turn, smiled back as best as he could. Don't worry. He half laughed, half cried out, vision blurring with tears. I'm getting you out of here. Hang on. Don't try to play hero brat. You ain't getting nothing. There was a sudden pull on his body. Izuku gasped as his face slammed against his body, and the surface membrane threatened to break apart to let him through. Izuku strained his neck to keep his head out of the filth, and instead focused on maneuvering his hands to reach for his friend, desperate to pull her out. When he felt something soft, something much more tangible than the fluids, he grabbed onto it tightly and pulled. His grip slackened, and he promptly dug himself deeper into his body, clenching hard onto Katsumi's arms. I won't let you die here. Not like this, Kaken. Uraraka-san. Was the filth getting to his head now? Had he accidentally ingested some of the slop? Was he now in a state of delirium? He wasn't sure, as his head grew light and his exhausted consciousness was threatening to slip once more. But he held on and pulled. And pulled. And pulled. He couldn't let her die. Not until he told her. Not until he told the both of them. Arg. Vesicharaya. And with one strong tug, it snapped the confines apart, dragging Katsumi out in a single motion. She took in a lungful gulp of air, and that was more than enough for her, even with his body latching around her legs and attempting to pull her back in. Katsumi turned, eyes burning with hatred, and aimed her palm at the villain. You really thought you could get away with messing with us? Wrong move, you son of a beach. Nitroglycerin formed at her palm, and a spark set it ablaze. Puff. And die. And that one mighty blast was more than enough to cut him off once more. Another blackout, this time from his earlier exhaustion after his sudden spurt of adrenaline. Despite having worked out extensively, there was nothing that could have prepared him for the emotional stress that he had to deal with, which was apparently more than even his body could tolerate. He stayed unconscious much longer this time, though he wasn't even sure if that was the case. All that came to him was feeling, inch by inch, as his fingers twitched first before the heat graced his skin. At some point, he realized that he was lying down. The odd part was that his head wasn't on hard concrete as he'd expected, but was instead on something soft. Whatever it was, he wasn't complaining, though it would SCK if he'd apparently bled out from hitting something that he was now having perceptual delusions. Hey, Izuku! Someone's voice pulled him back from slipping back into unconsciousness. Focusing, he looked straight forwards, or up, technically, finding a shadow cast over him. He'd expected to see the darkening sky or piling smoke. Instead, there were eyes staring down at him, duplicating into 4s or 8s as they danced about, staring down at him. It took longer than he would have liked to ground himself in reality once more, and the eyes became 2. They were of a chocolate shade that he'd come to love, along with her rosy cheeks and short hair. Her expression was of abject relief, and he saw tears brimming in the corner of her eyes. Why, you're okay. She choked out a sob. Thank goodness. You Uraraka-san. Why, it's me. Someone took a hold of his hand. His head slowly gazed in the direction of the source, finding misty red eyes staring at him. Hard as they were also gentle in a way only he had ever been blessed enough to see, and her hair was completely undone, spilling down her back in her appealing way. D'med idiot. She barked hoarse. There was no mistaking the fear in her voice. Don't ever do that again. You almost got yourself killed, why? Her heartbreak got to him, and without thinking, his body was already moving. He slowly pushed himself up to sit, groaning and Two girls hastily tried to help him, the brunette warning him to take it slowly. He couldn't do that, however. Whatever else they wanted to say were cut off when he suddenly turned around and pulled the both of them into his arms. WWA. Aizuku. I'm so glad. He wept, his hug desperate and tight. Now more aware and awake, he was free to cry like the crybaby that he was, unwilling to let go. If something had happened to you both, I would have never forgiven myself. It was like a dam broken. His spilling emotions prompted Uraraka to break into tears, clutching at him tightly as she sobbed loudly, crying his name over and over again. Even Katsumi, as strong as she was not immune and buried her face into his shirt, soaking his collar as she tried desperately not to appear fragile despite him able to feel the shudders of her racking cries. He'd been so lucky. So lucky that he was able to stop something so terrible from happening to the girls he loved. He almost stood there, watching them die a slow death by asphyxiation while the heroes argued over nothings and the villain uncaring of them. And now, feeling them here, smelling their fragrances and tasting the subtle warmth of their bodies flush against his, the relief was incomprehensible. And he simply surrendered himself to it, hugging the girls and not willing to let them go, as if they would break the moment he did. So that was what she meant. Eventually, it was Katsumi who pulled away first, her eyes puffy and dried tear trails on her cheeks. "Demenit. Arg, I can't believe you," she hissed. "You put yourself in unnecessary danger, you know. You're lucky nothing bad happened." "Why? Bakugo-san is right," sniffled Uraraka, wiping her eye. "Why did you do that, Midoriya-kun? What do you mean? Would you have rather I just stand back and do nothing?" "Of course not. It was reckless, all right? You would have died if you did something wrong. Maybe. But I would have never forgiven myself if I let that fortune-teller's words come true. I had to stop it." His words prompted confused looks from the two girls, to which a gentle smile crept onto his face. "It's funny. I had thought that fortune-teller I met all those weeks ago was just saying something to intimidate me without having any legs to stand on. And today, I almost saw the two people I love die right in front of me." Green orbs dropped to their hands. He took Katsumi's in his left, Uraraka's in his right, and clutched them tightly. "But now I'm utterly grateful because I've actually done it. I made sure to prevent such a terrible fate from happening. I'm happy," he laughed breathily. "So happy that you two are okay." Perhaps his sincerity had reached them, for both girls turned an appealing shade of red in the face of his words. "Midoriya-kun," the brunette squeaked. "That's. And today has made it very clear just where I stand in all of this. My feelings on this entire situation, my feelings for you too, what I really want in my life." He took a deep breath, remembering his father's words. Someday, you might meet the girl of your life. And at that point in time, you need to take the leap or else you'll regret it forever. And thinking on how unlikely it was that the advice would ever be applied for him. Today, he would be relying on his advice, though in a way that would likely surpass the older Midoriya's expectations by leaps and bounds. His head fell in a bow. "Katsumi, Uraraka-san, I love the both of you. Will you two go out with me?" A moment of silence. And then the world around him shifted. A sudden causing shook him to the core when he met their gaze once more, akin to having electricity coursing through him from head to toe. His soul ignited with newfound power, information and knowledge flooding his brain like a torrential wave, and his emotions dialed up all the way to 11. It was so sudden, like a gunshot straight into his chest that gave him no room for thought. And then, a bell sounded off in his head, followed by messages that could not be perceived with his eyes whatsoever, yet the message was seared directly into his brain that he immediately understood just what was going on. "Congratulations! Lady AI's blessing has activated, and you have now become the lover. May your love save the world. You have captured the hearts of Katsumi Bakugo and Ochako Uraraka. You can now assess their profiles." And then, as if materializing from thin air, white words popped into existence above his girlfriend's heads in simple font. One above the blonde's head, Katsumi Bakugo, explosive Tsundra. And another above the brunette's head, Chako Uraraka, affectionate best friend. And in unison, the three screamed the same thing for completely different reasons. What the foo? Author's notes. Yeah boy. Bet you didn't see this kind of story coming, did you? HRM story with our green bean protagonist. How very original. Obviously it isn't. And in case you can't tell, this story is heavily inspired by the 100 Girlfriends Who Really Love You, GOAT manga, by the way. I cannot get over it whatsoever. Been rereading it over and over again, and the 100 Girlfriends Who Really Love Deku by Brypops on this website. Go give them both a read. It's pretty fun. And yes, fellow readers, this is a gamer FIC. I apologize if this is going to turn plenty of you off, but this was my intention from the beginning. I'd wanted to try writing a gamer FIC for a long time, and this was an opportunity to play with the trope in a way that's different from the norm. I recognize that it can get repetitive, so I want to try something with it that will come off as comedic and fun to see. I was inspired to try after reading SAO, The Eroge by Saint Infernal Neos. My all-time favorite SAO story. Go check this one out as well. Nevertheless, it's just nice to return to my roots to write a BNHA FIC. Haven't done that in a long time. Here, it'll be nothing but absolutely silly romance, and with all the ideas I want to play around with, I assure you that I will do my best to deliver a fun read for you. Also, I'm sure many of you will realize that Izuku will be somewhat out of character. Introverted, but certainly not as stutter-heavy or socially inept as canon Izuku is. Just in case anyone asks this question down the line, I attribute it to one reason. Izuku is actually friends with Katsumi. While that may seem too simple of a reason that may not be enough to subvert a great amount of social awkwardness, his lack of bullying by Katsumi, who would technically be making his life a living hell otherwise, and their good relationship would certainly be a good factor for his upbringing to be a positive one. And since she would technically ward off any potential bullying from their classmates, it's just another bonus. Therefore, that one thing should help in his social skills, albeit not to the point where he'd just be completely comfortable from the get-go. That's for him to grow into down the line. For 2025, I'll try and focus on this story as well as a couple of old ones that I've left in the dust for a bit. This story will hopefully be updated every Sunday. And by the way, the last time I watched this anime was back in Season 3. So I'm missing a lot of context.